The show opens with our MC Taro Sakamoto, a highly respected hitman, seen coldly marching through enemy territory. Spotting several men firing at him, Sakamoto nonchalantly deflects the projectiles, dashing through the men only to dispatch them one by one. As Sakamoto heads deeper into enemy lines, he continues to brandish his skills, feared by every gangster, but also admired by every hitman. One day while shopping, Sakamoto ran into Aoi, the love of his life. Having fallen in love, Sakamoto quit his life as a hitman and got married to Aoi only to help give birth to Hana. Now living the life of a family man, we cut to the present where Sakamoto runs a convenience store, but outside a blonde kid states he's finally tracked down Sakamoto. Hard at work, Sakamoto watches as a kid draws a target on his store's sliding doors, asking for a free juice box if he hits a bullseye. With Aoi and Hana watching the boy miss, the boy asks for another go, accidentally spilling some of his calligraphy ink on a businessman that enters the store. Annoyed, the businessman prepares to punish the boy, but Sakamoto steps in, scaring the businessman with his sheer aura. Sakamoto had prepared to assassinate the businessman with a pen, but luckily no violence was needed. But everyone suddenly notices a blonde boy in his store. The boy compliments Sakamoto's readiness to assassinate the businessman, personally introducing himself as Shin the Psychic, but Sakamoto thinks of incapacitating Shin with a single blow to the head. Sensing his demise, Shin reassures Sakamoto that he's here to talk, sitting down only to confirm that Sakamoto had indeed given up on his hitman life. Seeing Sakamoto with a round body, Shin reminds Sakamoto he was once the legendary hitman, begging Sakamoto to return to his duties. As Sakamoto slurps up some instant noodles, Shin chooses to smoke to relieve some stress. But in an instant, Sakamoto splits Shin's cigarette into two, reminding Shin they're in a no-smoking zone. Realizing that Sakamoto hasn't lost his touch since he's retired, Sakamoto is suddenly called by an older man for a favor, making Shin wonder if Sakamoto is only disguising as a civilian. Having reached the older man's backyard, Sakamoto instantly gets to work cutting down a tree. Next, Sakamoto is asked by a lady to help feed her picky daughter some vegetables, managing to use a silver spoon to feed her. Finally, Sakamoto sees two boys fighting over who gets to play with a ball, choosing to split the ball into two with his bare hands, solving the issue. As Sakamoto takes a break, Shin realizes Sakamoto is a handyman for the whole town, praising Sakamoto for concealing his identity so well, but Shin still thinks Sakamoto has fallen so far from his legendary status. Heading to his car, Shin notes how it's only been 5 years since he's seen Sakamoto, still admiring Sakamoto for being so awesome, wishing for the day Sakamoto returns. Suddenly receiving a call from his boss, Shin reports that he had failed to convince Sakamoto to return, but the boss asks if Shin had eliminated Sakamoto for betraying them. Shin tries to convince the boss to leave Sakamoto alone, but the boss reminds Shin he'll be eliminated and replaced if he fails. That night, Shin washes up, thinking back on his missions with Sakamoto, knowing he should be the one to put his old partner down. Heading back to the store the next day, Shin walks past Aoi, Hana, and the boy playing, apologizing in advance. Upon entering Sakamoto's store, Shin tells Sakamoto he'll be leaving town today, choosing to pull out his gun as he bids farewell to Sakamoto. Seeing Shin pull the trigger, Sakamoto chooses to spit his cough drop as Shin's bullet, deflecting it onto a bag of chips on the counter. Trying to reload, Shin is distracted by an ice cream flung at him, but suddenly realizes that Sakamoto has disappeared. Cautiously scanning the aisles, Sakamoto manages to distract Shin by making some noise in one of the aisles, only to make use of a rubber band and some cough drops to snipe Shin through the shelves. Rushing to evade Sakamoto's cough drops, Shin and Sakamoto catch a glance of each other at the end of the aisle, but Sakamoto tosses a cream puff at Shin, obstructing his vision. Having bought enough time, Sakamoto sneaks up from behind, winding up a torrential kick that sends Shin flying through several shelves, reminding Shin of when he used to train with Sakamoto. As Shin falls unconscious, he suddenly awakens a few hours later, spotting Hana and Aoi relieved to see him awake, learning he had been brought to the second floor of Sakamoto's store. Seeing Sakamoto's loving family, Shin gets weirded out, confused as to why they're serving him a lovely meal even after his assassination attempt. Believing the food to be poisoned, Shin chooses to face the challenge head-on, but instead begins breaking down, grateful to be served such a delicious and hearty meal. Finally understanding why Sakamoto retired, Shin and Sakamoto head outside, prompting Shin to graciously thank Sakamoto and his family for taking care of him. With Sakamoto asking Shin to come again soon, we cut to later that night, where Shin sits before his boss and his gang, begging his boss to let Sakamoto live. The boss and his henchmen scoff at such a pathetic request, reminding Shin that Sakamoto must be eliminated, having abandoned their organization. But Shin offers to give his life for Sakamoto. With the boss accepting Shin's offer, the boss secretly thinks about how gullible Shin is, but having already expected the boss to lie to him, Shin turns his gun on the boss. As Shin begins a shootout with his former organization, we cut to Sakamoto listening in on their conversation, choosing to transform his convenience store into an armory littered with deadly weapons. As Sakamoto opts for a stun gun, we cut back to Shin, who slowly begins dismantling the enemies, switching from his gun to martial arts to dispatch the men. Unfortunately, Shin is caught off guard, struck by a bazooka, but still manages to run for cover. With the men rallying together, the boss reminds everyone that Shin is a psychic, meaning he can read people's minds if they're close enough. Continuing his onslaught, Shin takes out a few more men, realizing he has a single magazine left, ultimately getting struck in the leg by a bullet. Falling onto his knees, Shin is surrounded, finally giving up. Luckily, Sakamoto appears, paralyzing the men surrounding Shin. As the boss orders his men to take out Sakamoto, Sakamoto nonchalantly opens a pair of chopsticks. Increasing his speed to knock out the men, all whilst flexing, he can catch the bullets with chopsticks. Spotting a man wielding a katana, Sakamoto easily evades, kicking the man aside only to block a spray of bullets with pins, slaying the gunman with said pins. Cleaning up the remaining gunmen, Sakamoto locks onto the boss and his remaining henchmen, running to evade the projectiles only to slay the boss with a single slash. With Shin reminded of why he respects Sakamoto so much, Shin realizes Sakamoto had bugged his gun when he was unconscious and is suddenly offered a job by Sakamoto. Sakamoto says he'll pay Shin 800 yen an hour, cutting to the next day where Shin has started on his first day, asking Sakamoto to not eat ramen, especially since they're low on stock. As Hana and Aoi compliment Shin's new apron, Shin makes use of his psychic abilities to help out an elderly lady, but is threatened by Sakamoto to keep their past a secret from the others. Fast at work, Shin restocks the shelves and mans the cash register, cutting to later that day, where Shin praises Sakamoto for slaying all those men. Hearing Shin mention Sakamoto slaying people, Aoi reminds Sakamoto he promised to leave his life of a hitman behind, prompting Sakamoto to reassure Aoi that he dealt non-lethal blows. Angry, Aoi reminds Sakamoto they have a family rule, and if Sakamoto ever breaks the rule, she'll divorce him, scaring Sakamoto. When Shin wonders what this family rule is, Sakamoto silences Shin in his mind, both heading to Niokita Chinatown to pick up some items. Seeing Sakamoto pick up some heavenly pork buns for the whole family, and at half the price, Shin admires Sakamoto for being so family-oriented, but Shin is still curious about Sakamoto's family rule. Refusing to explain anything, the duo continue walking, suddenly spotting a pink-haired girl burst through the window of a high-rise, coincidentally collapsing onto Sakamoto. Although Sakamoto is fine, Sakamoto gets sad seeing his pork buns have been squashed, but our duo suddenly sees several men call out to the pink-haired girl. Introducing herself as Lu Xiaodang, the mystery girl, Lu scoffs at the men's pathetic attempts to catch her, but Shin notices Sakamoto is more sad, thinking about how upset Hana and Aoi will be having no buns to bring home. As the men rush Lu, she begins knocking out the men with her martial arts, something Shin recognizes as Tai Chi, watching as 3 men suddenly surround Lu. Even still, Lu tosses and knocks out 2 of the men, unfortunately captured by the 3rd. Seeing the men prepare to slash at Lu's legs, Sakamoto stops the man's knife with some tongs, breaking them only to put the man to sleep. Seeing an opening, Shin knocks out the man, restraining Lu with a sign, allowing Lu to disarm the final gun-wielding man, knocking him out. As the trio catch their breaths, they suddenly hear an even larger swarm of men chasing after them, forcing Sakamoto to pick Lu up, all three fleeing from the swarm. Elsewhere, we see a henchman reporting that they've failed to capture Lu, pissing Wang off, the CEO of Danshokai Incorporated. Wang reminds everyone he slayed Lu's entire village, and still they failed to capture her. But before Wang can dismiss his men, a knife decapitates his messenger's head. Known as Bacho and Sun He, Wang orders the psychotic brothers to hunt down Lu no matter what, stating that Lu has the key for them to rule over the black market. With the brothers given free rein to slaughter all that gets in their way, we cut back to our trio where Lu tells Shin and Sakamoto about her belonging to the Lu Mafia clan. Lu says she is currently in possession of her family's hidden vault key. But when Shin suggests Lu get rid of such a dangerous key, Lu refuses since her family died protecting the key, remembering the final moments of her clan burning down all whilst her parents beckon Lu to flee with the key. Lu apologizes for getting others involved, leaping away, but before Shin can follow after Lu, Sakamoto holds Shin back. Before Lu disappears, Sakamoto asks if Lu can make pork buns, agreeing to assist Lu, and in exchange Lu must make pork buns for them once they make it out alive. Before Shin can question Sakamoto's judgment, Bacho appears, landing a direct kick on a Sakamoto that sends him flying. Sun scolds Bacho for attacking so barbarically, alerting Shin as to who these monsters are. But Lu says they're twin hitmen that charge high hit rates for their perfect resume of assassinations. On top of things, the brothers have been seen sketching the heads of their victims, something that pleases Bacho since they're so well known. But Sun reminds Bacho they should be more elusive since they're hitmen. Seeing Shin dash in close, Sun easily catches Shin's fist, mocking Shin for acting so emotionally after Sakamoto was defeated. Leaping back, Shin feels bad for those who disrespect Sakamoto, but Bacho takes the chance to blink behind Lu, preparing a lethal slash. Appearing out of nowhere, Sakamoto smashes Bacho into the ground, shocking everyone as Sakamoto's punch tears a hole in the roof they're standing on, making Sun wonder who Sakamoto is. As Sakamoto ignores Sun's questions, Bacho says he'll pay Sakamoto back, all while Sun asks for Lu to hand over the key in exchange for a quick death. Hearing Lu choosing to give her life to protect the key, Sun reveals that her parents said something similar before he slaughtered them, infuriating Lu as she rushes forward. Grabbing and tossing Lu back, Lu is reminded not to get emotional. But Lu says the vault contains her ancestors' legacy, something Lu's father had given his life to protect. Having heard enough, Sun tosses a kunai at Lu, forcing Sakamoto to intercept the blade, asking the brothers to not dictate others' lives. With Lu seeing Sakamoto bleeding from catching the kunai, Lu asks why Sakamoto would go so far to protect her, flashing back to the Christmas season when a younger-looking Sakamoto has brought Aoi a gift. Aoi is angry seeing Sakamoto covered in blood, knowing he had to murder people to get her a gift. Seeing as Sakamoto refuses to change, Aoi chooses to jump from their location, forcing Sakamoto to chase after her, clinging onto her. Luckily, the snow beneath them softened their fall. But Aoi uses the moment to show Sakamoto just like how he cares for Aoi. There are people that care for the people Sakamoto kills, asking Sakamoto to promise to never slay another and instead save people to atone for his past. With Shin reading Sakamoto's mind, he finally realizes what the no-kill rule is, watching as the brothers rush them. As Sakamoto blocks all of Sun's attacks, Shin chooses to evade and dodge all of Bacho's slashes, intriguing the brothers as to who Sakamoto is. Choosing to unveil one of their hidden techniques, both Bacho and Sun fire off a flurry of attacks at Sakamoto, but Sakamoto nonchalantly slips them all, asking for a pain patch having stressed his neck. Before the brothers can unveil another hidden technique, Sakamoto puts Bacho to sleep with a cooking pot, following up by breaking Sun's weapon using a wok. Seeing Shin helping Sakamoto patch up his hand, Sun attempts to target Lu, but Shin had read his mind, binding and tossing Sun back with a rope. For the finishing blow, Sakamoto smashes a refrigerator on his son, tying the two men up as Lu wonders who our duo is. As Sakamoto munches on some crab, we cut over to Wang, who wonders where the brothers are. yearning for the day he can open the vault before him. Suddenly receiving a delivery, Wong spots the brothers tied up, suddenly restrained by Lu, who says she needs to pay Wong back for all that he's done. A few minutes later, Lu is seen repeatedly punching Wong, exciting Shin as he wants to join in, but Sakamoto prepares to put Shin to sleep. Having had enough, Lu says she shouldn't slay people and instead should live a happy life, choosing to finally unlock the vault with her key. As the trio head inside, they're amazed by the antique relics littered all over the vault. Something Shin reads are valuable items every past leader of the Lu clan treasures. Seeing the item her father left behind, Lu reads that her father had left behind some valuable booze to one day share with Lu, making Lu treasure her family. Sitting down, Sakamoto unveils the squished pork buns, snacking on them as Lu remarks the Japanese buns are pretty tasty. The next morning, Shin sees reports of the aftermath of their brawl with Wand and the brothers, suddenly seeing Sakamoto enter the store exhausted. Seeing Lu enter with an apron, Shin wonders why Lu doesn't just sell her family's vault instead of working. But Sakamoto reminds Shin that he is now part of the family and must follow their family's no-kill rule. At the same time, we see several figures receive a bounty on Sakamoto and Shin, with Sakamoto's bounty valued at 1 billion yen. With several days passing, Lu continues to show up to work, but is scolded by Shin for being 2 hours late. Restocking the aisles, Shin calls out Lu for placing detergent in the drinks section of the fridge, but Lu says customers can figure it out themselves, stuffing everything into one place. Shin wonders if Lu has ever worked a job in her life, learning that Lu used to help her dad dig and bury strange bags, but this makes Shin ask for Lu to be fired. Hearing the two argue, Sakamoto asks for Shin to not say such mean things and that Lu should apologize when she's late, shocking the two. Heading outside, Sakamoto reminds Shin to sweep outside and for Lu to finish prepping the pork buns, but Shin is more worried realizing how talkative Sakamoto is. Sakamoto reminds Shin that he is human too, but out of nowhere a second Sakamoto appears, sitting down at the counter and picking up where the first one left off. The first Sakamoto accuses the second of being a doppelganger, thrusting a sword at the second, but the second dodges, holding up a blade to the first as the first pulls out a gun. With both Sakamotos standing down, the second Sakamoto greets Nagumo, prompting the first Sakamoto to unsheath his disguise. Shin gets terrified, unable to read Nagumo's mind, watching as Nagumo turns and laughs at both himself and Lu. Annoyed, Shin and Lu punish Nagumo, demanding to know how Sakamoto knows Nagumo, learning that Nagumo works in the supermarket across the street and is friends with Sakamoto. Hearing Nagumo mention he is 18, Shin wonders how Sakamoto met him, but Sakamoto reveals Nagumo is 27 and that there is no supermarket across the street. Seeing as Nagumo lied to them again, Shin and Lu beat and tie Nagumo up, prompting Nagumo to mention that Sakamoto has a 1 billion yen bounty on his head, but Lu and Shin refuse to believe another one of Nagumo's outrageous lies. Nagumo states the JA had recently decided on it, and the news will be released tomorrow, but just then a pizza delivery arrives, exciting everyone. As the delivery man places the pizza on the counter, Nagumo says there are rumors of Sakamoto's legendary return, but just then Shin reads the delivery man's mind, hearing the man mocking everyone. Deeming himself to be Pizza Nakajima, Nakajima is revealed to be a hitman, using the tied-up Nagumo as a hostage. Upon seeing Sakamoto and Lu nonchalantly eating pizza, Nakajima warns Sakamoto to take him seriously, but in an instant Nagumo appears behind Nakajima, placing him in a stranglehold. As Nagumo tightens his grip, Sakamoto orders Nagumo to release the unconscious man, making Nagumo ask if Sakamoto will truly survive without killing. Nagumo reminds Sakamoto that he himself may be after Sakamoto, defusing the situation seeing that Shin and Lu are ready to fight, but reminds Sakamoto that his kind specializes in taking down other hitmen. Before Nagumo leaves, Sakamoto asks who is benefiting from his death, but Nagumo has no idea, calling out how stupid it was for Sakamoto to draw attention to himself when he wiped out Wong and his company. Nagumo says there won't be any more newbie assassination attempts, taking Nakajima with him only to bid farewell to Sakamoto. disappearing before Shin can follow him. As Sakamoto turns to face the pizza box, we zoom out to see several people watching Sakamoto through the pizza box, all refusing to believe such a fat man could be worth 1 billion yen. Speaking up, one of the men from Don Denkai reminds the others to not underestimate Sakamoto. Having heard he used to belong to the Order, a mythical elite group, but people still believe Sakamoto is rusty after 5 years of retirement. Just then, they all turn their heads to the screen, hearing Sakamoto threaten them to try their best, only to destroy the camera. That evening, Shin wonders if Sakamoto will be okay now that others have his sights on him, but Sakamoto thinks they should lay low for a while. Just then, Hana and Aoi appear, both excited for tomorrow as Sakamoto suddenly realizes what they have planned for tomorrow. Having arrived at Sugar Park Amusement Park, the gang immediately rides a roller coaster, all having mixed feelings about such a ride. Hana takes the chance to show off the park's cute bunny mascot, Sugar Bunny, someone that reminds Lou of Sakamoto. Seeing Aoi so excited to spend time with everyone, Shin declares their operation today is to protect the Sakamotos and ensure everyone has a good time. Seeing Lou scanning the surrounding area for enemies, Shin says that he can read the minds of people in a 30-meter radius, stating those worked up are most likely hitmen. At that moment, Shin detects someone approaching, alerting Sakamoto. Revealed to be Kuriai Ninga disguised as a janitor, Kuriai makes his way towards Sakamoto all whilst Lou guides Aoi and Hana elsewhere. As Kuriai passes Sakamoto, he pulls out a needle ready to slay Sakamoto, but without batting an eye, Sakamoto plunges a pin into Kuriai's chest, only for Shin to carry Kuriai away. With Aoi and Hana not realizing what happened, Shin and Lou dispose of Kuriai's body, amazed that Sakamoto incapacitated Kuriai without hitting any vital organs. Having witnessed everything, Tatsu scolds Kuriai for being so obvious, annoyed at Shin's mind-reading powers, but wonders if he can suppress his killing intent to go undetected. With Tatsu passing by Shin, he manages to brush by without being detected, cutting to later that day where the gang is riding another roller coaster ride. With Shin and Lou positioned at the back to spot any attackers, Shin reports he doesn't hear anything suspicious, but Lou points out a strange pointy-haired looking man. Hearing the two talk about him, Tatsu lets his killing intent slip, alerting Shin to Tatsu's hitman status. As Tatsu fires off a bullet at Sakamoto, Sakamoto simply deflects it with his bulletproof glasses, but Shin takes the chance to remove his harness. Leaping out of his seat, Shin falls onto Tatsu's location, dragging him out as they both fall to a lower railing on the ride. Unable to read Tatsu's mind, Shin suddenly jumps, sensing the ride appearing behind him, but Tatsu uses the opening to toss 2 knives at Shin. Knowing he can't dodge both, Shin is forced to endure a scratch to the leg, suddenly collapsing having been poisoned. Tatsu remarks that his poison will take Shin's life in a few moments, using the chance to slander Sakamoto as he points out how Sakamoto fears death. Defending Sakamoto's name, Shin gets up, once again leaping over the ride approaching from behind, but this time he jumps onto his seat, dragging Tatsu for the ride. Tatsu is impressed, easily able to defend against Shin's pathetic punches, forcing Shin to rack his brain for a solution as Tatsu pulls out a knife. Scanning the surroundings, Shin hears something, evading Tatsu's advances only to drag him, falling onto a play. Having taken on the disguise of Sugar Bunny himself, Shin catches Tatsu off guard when he manages to move and evade his attacks, even going on the offense even after being blinded by Tatsu's poison. As the crowd cheers on the bunny, it's revealed that Sakamoto is off in the crowd instructing Shin how to move, perfectly countering and forcing Tatsu into a corner. Infuriated, Tatsu slashes at Shin's head, surprised to see Shin has his eyes closed, but Sakamoto spots an opening, ordering Shin to put Tatsu to sleep, wrapping up the performance. As Lou continues to ride the roller coaster, we zoom out to see Boiled and Abiguro now being dispatched to deal with Sakamoto. But Boiled orders Abiguro to not slack off and not commit unnecessary murders, something Abiguro finds attractive. Back with Shin, Lou helps apply the poison antidote to his eyes, all while Sakamoto asks who hired Tatsu. Seeing Tatsu playing dumb, Lou borrows Tatsu's poison knife, stabbing him only to begin pouring out the antidote, demanding Tatsu talk if he doesn't want to perish. Tatsu reveals that he was hired by Don Denkai, an underground company with a toxic work environment that requires hitmen to work solo. Shin calls Tatsu a hypocrite for selling out his employer, but Tatsu states he isn't loyal since he's part-time, adding that he is part of the JAA as well. With Lu curious as to what the JAA is, Shin shows Lu his license for the Japanese Association of Assassins. Apparently, the JAA is a company that helps manage the top hitmen, giving them hits in exchange for a fee, and only works with the top 400 hitmen, with both Shin and Sakamoto being members. Seeing as this is the perfect chance, Tatsu asks if Sakamoto used to be in the order, but upon seeing Sakamoto's serious glare, Tatsu is impressed that the rumors he heard weren't just lies. At that moment, Aoi and Hana arrive, recognizing the tied-up Tatsu as the villain they saw in the performance, convinced that Shin is simply practicing more performances with Tatsu brushing him off. With the gang all heading off to enjoy Hana's handmade meals, Shin stays back to confiscate Tatsu's deadly weapons, asking Tatsu to enjoy his life. Tatsu is surprised he has been spared, spotting Hana running back to give him a bandage, weirded out. Now that he's alone, Tatsu reveals he could have freed himself all this time, but instead chooses to enjoy the amusement park, cutting over to Sakamoto, who indulges in the lovely handmade meals with the others. Shin utters that his mind is currently foggy, having been afflicted by the antidote, prompting Lu to ask Sakamoto if they could leave for the day. With Aoi arriving, she demands to know what our trio are hiding, cutting over to Tatsu, who is being confronted by Boiled. In an instant, Abiguro restrains and sits on Tatsu, but seeing Abiguro acting so cocky, Boiled orders Abiguro to close her legs. Embarrassed, Abiguro lets Tatsu go, learning that Abiguro and Boiled have been sent to ensure Tatsu doesn't fail, especially since Tatsu will be removed if he fails. Abiguro voices how excited she is to be hunting down the legendary Sakamoto, but Tatsu notes how goofy the two are, remembering that the duo had eliminated over 100 people during the Balkan battles 2 years ago. Back with Sakamoto, he along with Lu and Shin rush to explain their excitement for the amusement park, reassuring Aoi and Hana that they're good to continue exploring the park. More alert than ever, the gang ensures Hana and Aoi's time in the park isn't spoiled, cutting to later that evening where Aoi takes the gang to a haunted house, a location that favors assassins. Guided by a deceased nurse, the nurse explains her backstory, tickling Aoi and Hana's curiosity, but Lu is clearly hating the atmosphere. With the gang left to explore the haunted house, Boiled and Abiguro are seen spying on them through the control room, all whilst the gang compliment the unique details done to the interior. Out of nowhere, Shin is attacked by a zombie, forcing Sakamoto to draw the zombie's attention, evading and barraging the zombie with strikes, impressing Shin as the zombie seems to be stunned. Continuing through the ride, Sakamoto shows Shin the zombie's license, noting how the zombie was a mere rookie hitman. But Boiled and Abiguro can't help but be amazed at Sakamoto's moves even after retiring. Hearing Abiguro begging to slay Sakamoto, Boiled orders Abiguro to leave Sakamoto to him. Abiguro reassures Boiled Sakamoto is all his, asking Boiled to not work out when he's stressed, reminding Boiled he used to be Sakamoto's friend. Flashing back, we enter the Hitman Training Center, only to see a 15-year-old Boiled meeting a 14-year-old Sakamoto for the first time. Boiled had heard Sakamoto had beaten up his friends, impressed to see Sakamoto so skilled, so they ultimately clicked as friends. Spending more time together, they are seen alone during Valentine's Day, only for several girls to confess their love to Sakamoto. With Nagumo also showing off his haul of Valentine's gifts, Boiled confirms that Sakamoto and himself were actually not alike, something that makes Abiguro love Boiled even more, seeing Boiled acting tough. As Sakamoto and the family head deeper into the haunted house, Sakamoto is forced to deal with several more zombie attackers. Amazing Shin as Hana is unfazed by the horror around her. Not wanting to be beaten, Lu chugs her clan's remedy to suppress her fear, but Shin calls her out for simply using alcohol to quench her nerves. Passing by a sealed-off door, the gang hears some banging sound, prompting Lu to excitedly open the door, only to realize a horde of zombies had been lying in wait. With Shin unable to protect Aoi and Hana, Sakamoto attempts to make his way through the swarm, suddenly intercepted by Boiled himself. With Boiled blowing Sakamoto into a different section of the house, Boiled evades a card thrown at him. Hearing Sakamoto demand Boiled let him pass. With Boiled disappointed to see Sakamoto doesn't remember him, Sakamoto gets pissed, declaring he'll show Boiled hell. At the same time, Shin manages to clear the zombies, entering a room only to be relieved seeing Aoi and Hana sleeping peacefully. Speaking up, Abiguro reassures Shin that the girls have only been put to sleep, declaring that she and her zombies will have to distract Shin until Boiled is done. Out of nowhere, Lu fires off a kick that sends Abiguro flying. Something Shin recognizes is the drunken fist style of fighting. With Abiguro excited for a decent fight, we cut back to Boiled to ask again if Sakamoto remembers him. Ignoring the question, Sakamoto asks where his family is, dashing in close to sneak attack, but Boiled detonates an explosion before Sakamoto can get close. Equipping his special gloves, Boiled sends several more explosives bouncing around the room, detonating them only to use the explosion to land a flush punch on Sakamoto. Back with Lu, she rushes in for strike on Abiguro, but Abiguro nonchalantly catches Lu's fist, complimenting Lu's technique only to shake Lu until she gets sick. Wanted to have some fun, Abiguro orders Shin to be tied up, uttering that she wants to draw out Lu's strength, giving Lu a challenge. Abiguro wants Lu to land a hit on her every 10 seconds, or else Shin will be sliced, but Lu suddenly begins crying, yelling that she doesn't want to hurt anyone. Back with Sakamoto, we see him completely defeated by Boiled, listening as Boiled reminds Sakamoto that it's been 5 years since he's retired. When Sakamoto tries another attack, Boiled simply detonates another explosive, declaring that his super ball bombs combined with his rocket dynamite punch will ensure Sakamoto is defeated. Sakamoto is reminded of how cringy Boiled was, remembering a younger Boiled showing off his new gear along with the composition for said explosions. Annoyed at Sakamoto's weak attitude, Boiled chases Sakamoto with his explosions and fist, crying that he looked up to the Chad Sakamoto was. Charging up a lethal blow, Sakamoto catches a glimpse of his family, suddenly sent flying deep into the building corridor. As Boiled turns to leave, he bids farewell to his teenage memories with his best friend, but out of nowhere Boiled senses immense blood lust from down the corridor. Marching towards Boiled, Sakamoto begins listing the chemicals Boiled uses for his bomb's composition, declaring that he's finally remembered Boiled and will now show Boiled how much he's grown. Back with Lu, she manages to withstand several of Abiguro's strikes, impressing Shin as he thought he would be finished. As Abiguro sends a roundhouse kick, Lu manages to duck, striking Abiguro with her braids, luckily resetting the 10-second timer. Firing off an axe kick, Abiguro pummels Lu, frightening Shin as Abiguro turns to leave. Surprisingly, Lu gets back up with a nosebleed, laughing at how desperate Shin sounded. Abiguro gets weirded out, seeing Lu scoffing down more booze, but when Abiguro chases Lu with several attacks, she fails to land a single one, instead receiving a kiss that resets the timer. In a mere instant, Lu fires off a lethal kick of her own, terrifying Abiguro as she barely dodges, begging Lu to try and slay her. Sadly, Lu utters that it's against her family's rules to kill anyone, annoying Abiguro as she reminds Lu that Sakamotos are a family of 3. Catching Abiguro's kick, Lu is pissed hearing Abiguro calling their family matters stupid, countering with a devastating hook, but before it lands, Lu suddenly halts. Having awoken from her drunken daze, Lu asks to know where she is, but Abiguro begins to quiver. Having never considered anyone as her rival, Abiguro pulls Lu close, deeming Lu her frenemy for life. Back with Sakamoto, he terrifies Boiled, seeing as Sakamoto had slimmed down out of nowhere, but Boiled tries taunting Sakamoto when he reminds him of his family. Sakamoto states he believes in Shin and Lu, instantly dashing forth as he lands a swift punch on Boiled, blowing him through the building's walls. Following up, Sakamoto lands strike after strike, even clashing with Boiled's rocket fist, only to shatter it with his bare knuckles. Backing off, Boiled tanks all the blows, attempting to fire off several ball bombs, but Sakamoto catches each one before they have a chance to detonate, instead using them to empower his fist, knocking Boiled further back. Knocked down, Boiled demands to know how a retired Sakamoto is so strong. But Sakamoto reveals he has a reason to fight, having chosen to fight for the people he loves. Following a couple on a merry-go-round, they suddenly feel a massive rocking sound as something approaches their ride, revealed to be Sakamoto, who has slammed Boiled into a separate ride. As Boiled loses consciousness, we cut to Aoi, who has awoken next to Shin, Hana, and Lu, demanding to know how they got here. Making up an excuse, Shin rushes to search for Sakamoto. Cutting over to Sakamoto, he and Boiled nonchalantly exit the destroyed carriage, forcing Boiled to pay for the destroyed ride only for the two to head for some roasted pork buns. Joining the two, Shin is amazed to see Sakamoto so thin. Snapping some pics as Shin is reminded of the legendary Sakamoto, but Boiled is more curious as to how Sakamoto will get Don Denkai off his back. At that moment, Aoi appears, asking to know what this bounty on Sakamoto's head is. Forcing Shin and Boiled to sit in as well, Lu and Abiguro are seen escorting Hana elsewhere, all while Sakamoto reveals he has a bounty hit on him. Before Aoi can scold Sakamoto, Boiled asks that Aoi not be too harsh, seeing as Sakamoto was hiding his bounty to not worry Aoi, but Aoi orders Boiled to be silent. Taking out their family rules, Aoi reminds Sakamoto of Rule 6, asking Sakamoto to not hide anything from his family and instead gives Sakamoto permission to resolve things rather than hide it from his family. Seeing as things are fine now, the family head to enjoy the parade, prompting Shin to ask how Sakamoto plans to remove his bounty. Sakamoto says the only way is to find the client and make them withdraw the hit, but Abiguro says it'll take a while to track down the client. Shin asks if Boiled could give them his boss's contact details. Annoyed to see Boiled, is no help only to part ways with the duo. With Sakamoto stating he has other connections, we cut to the next day, where Sakamoto has regained all his weight, all heading through several alleyways only to stand before a video rental store. Searching through the shelves of the store, Shin stumbles onto a movie titled Don Denkai, all three heading out back to enjoy the show. The disc describes Don Denkai as a Hitman organization with over 50 members, even describing Don Denkai's headquarters along with how the organization was formed. But as the movie wraps up, Sakamoto heads out to pay. Charged with 706,000 yen, Sakamoto turns to leave but is warned by the receptionist that someone Sakamoto used to work with is after him, unable to give any more information than that. That night, we see Nagumo dining with three others, questioned by Hyo, who accuses Nagumo of meeting with Sakamoto. But when Nagumo states he didn't, Shishiba asks that everyone quiet down since they're waiting for someone special. With Hyo and Nagumo bickering, Shishiba asks how Osaraji is doing, warned by Osaraji to not take another bite of his meal. Upon further inspection, Shishiba calls for the chef, suddenly slamming the chef onto the table only to slay the chef, having not wanted onions in his risotto. At that moment, an older-looking man introduces himself as Iria from the J, amazed to have all the order members before him. But Hyo points out they're missing 4 others. Shishiba adds that 3 members never show, but it's strange how Takamura isn't with them, all blaming Takamura's old age for forgetting their meeting. Getting down to business, Iria reveals that someone has been slaying various hitmen in the JAA, requesting that the order assist with finding and eliminating the perpetrator. Back with Sakamoto, he and the others have made it to Don Denkai HQ, ordering everyone to keep the violence to a minimum as they all don their stealth gear. Heading inside, we see 2 men talk about Boiled's recent defeat at the hands of Sakamoto, both individually taken out as Shin and Sakamoto make quick work of the men. Having found new disguises, Shin states they must climb to the top floor where the boss is, cutting to several minutes later where our trio knocks out another man with a stun gun. Having tied the man up, the trio head through the hallway towards the boss room. But Shin gets worried seeing as he can't detect anyone nearby, all ultimately reaching a set of massive doors. With Sakamoto giving the signal, they burst into the boss's room, shocked to see a pile of corpses all whilst Nagumo sits in the middle of the room. Declaring that he had slayed all the Don Denkai members and the boss himself, Nagumo apologizes for what he's about to do, suddenly blinking behind Shin, only to puncture his neck. Luckily, Nagumo was only kidding, having arrived too late and discovered the Don Denkai members were already dead. Sakamoto asks why Nagumo is here, hearing that there has been an absurd amount of hits on Hitman, with a total of 100 JA members losing their life within the past few months. Shin realizes 100 is a quarter of all professional hitmen, hearing Nagumo refer to the perpetrator as X or slur, confirming that the order has been dispatched to deal with this new threat. Lu takes the chance to ask what the order is, learning that the JA selects the best hitmen to take on impossible missions, and Sakamoto himself was once in the order. Lu and Shin remind Nagumo that Sakamoto has retired from killing, but Nagumo does mention how Sakamoto's bounty, along with the various hitmen being slayed, started around the same time. Elsewhere, we see a man dressed in all white mark his territory with an X, having used the blood from his enemies to draw his signature marking. The next day, Shin notes how annoying it is for so many hitmen to still be after Sakamoto, all watching as another hitman enters the store only to be knocked out by one of Sakamoto's gun racks. Sakamoto thinks back on Nagumo's words, pointing out that since Sakamoto struggled against Boiled, he'll surely struggle in the future, ordering everyone to get stronger in preparation for what is to come. As Sakamoto trains his cardio, Shin continues to train his psychic skills, all whilst Lu drinks herself silly, managing to dispatch another hitman whilst drunk. Cutting to Haisuke Mishimo, we see him feeding his pet bird Paisuke, having just spent the last of his money on bird food, but gets excited to slay and collect the bounty on Sakamoto's head. Back at Sakamoto's shop, Shin and Lu are annoyed that the store will need repairing due to the hitmen attacking Sakamoto, but seeing as they're low on funds, Shin suggests they enter a paintball tournament with a prize of 1 million yen. At that moment, Mishimo enters the store, holding up a slimmer-looking Sakamoto, only to ask if our trio knows where his target is. Luckily, Sakamoto's chubby disguise convinces Mishimo that he's got the wrong store, but Shin wonders how stupid Mishimo truly is. When Shin reads Mishimo's mind, Shin gets annoyed seeing a clutter of random thoughts, managing to convince Mishimo that Taro Sakamoto is a very common name. Completely lost, Mishimo reveals that he won't be able to cover the travel fee home, nor does he have any food or money, despairingly leaving the store. When Shin and Lu try to get back to work, Shin realizes that Mishimo is still looking at them, shedding tears as he cries for help. Reluctantly, our trio sends Mishimo off with a bag of pork buns, gratefully sharing the meal with his bird. That night, Mishimo returns to his rundown tent, having been a gift from his grandma, only to declare that he'll be rich one day. Mishimo thinks back on when some older men fired him from being a hitman, swearing that he'll prove the higher-ups wrong. But suddenly a gust of wind topples Mishimo's tent. On the brink of tears, Mishimo suddenly spots a flyer, seeing it to be a paintball tournament for 1 million yen, crying out that this may be his big break. As the day of the 52nd Ikurizaka paintball tournament kicks off, Shin and Sakamoto arrive bright and early, stocking up on some high-end walkie-talkies. Off to the side, they spot that Lu will be cheering them on, not wanting to participate, but suddenly the trio spot Mishimo trying to join by himself, reminded that only teams of 2 to 5 can join. Luckily, Mishimo spots our trio, officially forming a team with Sakamoto and Shin. With the announcer explaining the rules, she states that paintball BB pellets will be used, allowing the whole street to be their playgrounds. But Shin is more impressed that the event is to encourage a community cleanup of the neighborhood. As the players get into position, our trio are seen going over the rules. But as the game starts, 4 men in jumpsuits target Sakamoto's group. In an instant, the 4 men are struck with paintballs, shocking Shin as Mishimo manages to locate and strike the 4 men in mere seconds. Before Shin can ask any questions, he leaps to evade several pellets, managing to strike out 2 other players, but 2 men seem to have snuck up on Sakamoto during the chaos. Unfortunately, Sakamoto steals the men's guns, easily eliminating another party as he dreams of bulletproofing his store and stocking up on all sorts of cup ramen. Mishimo is grateful to have such competent teammates, wondering if Shin and Sakamoto are paintball nerds, but Lu accidentally gets carried away cheering for our trio, revealing Sakamoto to be Mishimo's target. As Mishimo checks the photo once more, Shin tries to cover it by pointing out features Sakamoto is lacking from the photo, but as Mishimo and Shin share a laugh, The three suddenly raise their weapons ready to brawl. As Mishimo finally realizes who Sakamoto is, he states he hates liars. But before the trio can turn on each other, another party attempts to snipe them from afar. Forced to scatter, Shin and Sakamoto take down the enemy team, all whilst Mishimo calls for Paisuk to airdrop his actual rifle. Lock and loaded, Mishimo sends a bullet flying directly at Sakamoto, forcing Sakamoto to deflect the bullet with his palm, but loses a portion of his hand in the process. As Mishimo runs off to regather his thoughts, Shin and Sakamoto are forced to focus on the paintball players that have surrounded them. As Mishimo and Paisuk run off, they both cry, fearing they'll have to take down the people that helped them. But as the paintball tournament begins to wrap up, we see Sakamoto instruct Shin to not expose himself when dealing with snipers. With Sakamoto taking charge, he peeks to try and spot Mishimo, but a bullet ricochets off a nearby street mirror, forcing Sakamoto to dodge. Seeing Paisuk nearby, Shin wonders where Mishimo is. Following Mishimo, who is amazed Sakamoto dodged another one of his shots. Shin gets skeptical at Mishimo's skills, but Sakamoto reveals that Mishimo's projectiles have absurd spin to them. Bullets, Mishimo confirms, are meant to ricochet as to prevent the target from tracking the sniper's position. Stealing his resolve, Mishimo opts to end this, firing off several bullets, forcing both Sakamoto and Shin to constantly be on the move, weaving in and out of alleys and running through neighborhoods to survive. Turning away from a construction zone, Sakamoto and Shin choose to hide for a bit, all whilst Mishimo reflects on life. Throughout his life, Mishimo was never able to measure up to his peers mentally or physically, but when it came to shooting, Mishimo discovered his one passion in life. Sadly, when Mishimo started his first job, the higher-ups refused to take on a man that only excelled in shooting, even being scolded for failing to hold a knife during his first mission, leading Mishimo to be fired not long after. With no job or money, Mishimo swore to prove everyone wrong by slaying the legend himself. But having been speaking through his mic, Shin and Sakamoto are saddened by Mishimo's backstory. Hearing Mishimo so distraught, Shin advises Mishimo to ignore the haters, flustering Mishimo. At that moment, Shin yells into his mic, managing to locate Mishimo's location on a building, but whilst Mishimo is recovering, Sakamoto picks up a stone. With Mishimo locking back in, he spots Sakamoto cocking back his arm, only to fire off the stone at Mishimo's rifle, instantly obliterating the weapon. As Mishimo finally realizes the monstrous legend Sakamoto is, the paintball tournament ends with Sakamoto's team deemed the winners. That evening, Mishimo gets a beating, only to break down feeling pathetic, but Sakamoto reassures Mishimo that he is one of the best snipers he's personally faced, a compliment that makes Mishimo cry even more. As Shin gives 50 yen of their prize winning to Mishimo, they use the remainder to clean up the town, but Aoi is still impressed when they bring home a paintball trophy. Shin takes the chance to ask how Sakamoto and Aoi met, reading Aoi's mind as she remembers the first time she met Sakamoto. Having seen some blood on Sakamoto's shirt, Aoi rushed to hand him a bandage, but Sakamoto silences Shin with his mind before Shin can read any more of Aoi's thoughts. Several days later, Sakamoto and Aoi visit Hana at school, grateful that Shin and Lu are manning the store whilst they're gone. Following Lu and Shin, we see Shin asking Lu to not use his apron, but Lu asks that Shin not read her mind. At that moment, Mishimo enters asking for any leftover pork buns, only to see Lu barrage Shin with pork buns. Annoyed, Lu states that she can't trust someone that is constantly reading her mind, something that hurts Shin deeply as he chooses to leave the store. Several minutes later, Lu is seen alone at the counter, greeting several customers in hazmat suits only to be mistaken as Shin. Having been kidnapped, Lu overhears Mr. Tanaka and Saba speaking about how Shin fled from them 13 years ago, but Saba realizes that they may have kidnapped the wrong person. Tanaka divulges that there were once experiments done to create psychics, but Shin was the only one they succeeded on, weirding out the men as they fear Shin will read their minds as well. Hearing Tanaka talking badly about Shin, Lu fires off a kick that knocks Tanaka's helmet flying, demanding that Tanaka refrain from insulting his friend. With Tanaka confirming they kidnapped the wrong person, we cut back to Shin, who has returned to the store to apologize to Lu, but notices Lu is missing. When Shin begins to inspect some loose glass, he notices Sakamoto and the others are home, apologizing as he failed to protect Lu. Luckily, Sakamoto reveals that Shin's apron has a GPS tracker on it, cutting back to Lu, who hears Tanaka freaking out for failing another mission. As the men continue their journey back to their lab, Lu regrets saying the mean things to Shin, only for the men to spot Sakamoto and Shin riding in on a motorcycle. As Sakamoto demands the men hand over Lu, Tanaka spots Shin is with Sakamoto, sending out some of their men to deal with Sakamoto. Sadly, Sakamoto easily deals with an attacker, followed by Shin derailing another by jamming a piece of wood in their rides, only for Sakamoto to grind away at another's helmet with his Hot Wheels. Seeing as they're out of men, Tanaka wonders what they should do, ordering Lu to be quiet as Tanaka fears failing more than anything. Hearing Shin is on the roof of their car, Tanaka calls on Seiba, taking over the wheel all while Seiba joins Shin, asking to get paid extra later on. With Shin taking a fighting stance, Seiba dons his suit, suddenly turning invisible only to knock Shin onto another car on the highway. Leaping after Sakamoto, Seiba attempts to put Sakamoto down, but is surprised to see Sakamoto block his invisible strike. As Sakamoto begins strangling Seiba, Seiba chooses to puncture Sakamoto's motorcycle's fuel tank, only to light it on fire. Seeing Sakamoto's ride explode, Seiba returns to Tanaka's car. Amazed, Sakamoto lives up to his legendary Hitman status, but apologizes for not being able to retrieve Shin. Following Sakamoto, he and Shin observe the GPS stop at Okatabe, a location Shin knows is the headquarters of the lab he grew up in. Shin utters that the original scientists weren't evil whatsoever, wondering what has changed since he left, both taking the bus to their destination. Having stopped outside the Okatabe Science Museum, Shin reveals that the lab is concealed in the basement, both choosing to enter in hopes of retrieving Lu. Upon entering the museum, our duo are stopped by some workers that convince Sakamoto and Shin to stop for a picture, both given dinosaur heads to pose and keep. Back on track, Shin guides Sakamoto to a hidden passage, all whilst Lu is wheeled through the lab, having been tied up. As Lu looks around the lab, she suddenly is stopped as Kashima asks if Tanaka had succeeded with capturing Shin, wondering if the girl before them is truly the psychic they're after. Hesitantly, Tanaka lies, reminded by Kashima that Tanaka's life is on the line if they fail. But Lu is more curious as to why Kashima has a reindeer mask and stitches all over his body. Speaking up, Seiba reveals that he caught the wrong person, prompting Tanaka to be sent away with Lu, leading Kashima to ask Seiba to retrieve Shin himself. Back with Shin, he stands before several clocks, turning the clock's hands and maneuvering a nearby bear only to reveal a secret elevator. When Shin tries to enter the passcode from several years back, he's surprised to be denied, suddenly spotting the bear's head reveal a gun that fires at them. Managing to evade the gun spray, Sakamoto makes quick work of the brown bear, all watching as a second bear appears, but Shin skewers the white bear before it can fire off any projectiles. With a voice announcing that Phase 1 is over, the elevator along with the bear's corpses are removed, giving rise to the dinosaur bones behind them. Seeing the dinosaur attack with its tail, Sakamoto pulls Shin down, all whilst thinking about how Hana would love to see a real-life dinosaur. As Sakamoto continues to evade the dinosaur's advances, Shin manages to spot a device in the dinosaur's mouth, giving Sakamoto the idea to taser and paralyze the dinosaur. Sadly, the machinery controlling the dinosaur simply reboots, this time attacking Sakamoto more aggressively. Dodging to evade the dinosaur's tail, Sakamoto tries again to paralyze the creature, but gets his stun gun destroyed, pissing him off. No longer holding back, Sakamoto rushes towards the dinosaur's mouth, punching and shattering the machine in the dinosaur's mouth. Following up, Sakamoto knees the dinosaur away, only to finish off the creature with an axe kick. With Shin baffled by Sakamoto's sheer strength, we cut to Dr. Ishikawa, who begs to be given some time off, having been working for 3 days straight with no sleep. Refusing to hear it, a man in a suit knocks Ishikawa down, preparing to take Ishikawa's life when he hears Ishikawa call their research silly. At that moment, Sakamoto and Shin dispatch the man in the hazmat suit, exciting the researchers as they recognize Shin, revealing that the director Shin is looking for has been locked up in the lowest floor and the lab itself is taken over by an assassin group. Having appeared a year ago, the lab was overtaken by Kashima and his henchmen, dead set on integrating assassinations with new technology. Plus, Kashima has several powerful hitmen working for him. When Sakamoto declares they'll have to take care of Kashima first, Ishikawa hears someone coming, rushing to hide Sakamoto and Shin in lockers. At the same time, Tanaka is seen locked up, begging to be let out only for Liu to silence him with a kick. Annoyed, Tanaka points out how silly Liu is for trying to break the bars with a rock, both suddenly turning to greet director Asakura, who offers an alternative method to escape. Back with Ishikawa, he hurriedly greets mad Horiguchi, all whilst trying to not give away Shin and Sakamoto's hiding place. Intrigued, Horiguchi tortures Ishikawa with a borrowed pen, asking the other lab members if they know anything, but Horiguchi suddenly evades a stray pen. Spotting Shin has revealed himself. When Ishikawa asks why Shin isn't just hiding, Shin thinks back on the fond memories he had with the lab members, asking if Horiguchi is one of the leaders under Kashima. Confirming the fact, Horiguchi gets excited to show off their research, taking out a syringe, only to blink behind Shin stabbing him with said syringe. Putting some space between them, Horiguchi performs an experiment, suddenly changing Shin's voice as the syringe disrupts the signals in Shin's brain. Annoyed, Shin chases after Horiguchi, demanding that he fix him. But in an instant, Sakamoto appears, pummeling Horiguchi with a devastating punch. Having been finally free from the locker, Sakamoto asks if Shin wants to save the lab, both preparing to take back Shin's home. Back outside, we see Shishiba and Osaraji visiting the museum, both instructed by Nagumo to check out the place, curious if they'll manage to find a lead on Slur. Following Mishimo, he and Paisuke once again visits Sakamoto's store, spotting Hana sad, seeing as she's been left alone with no one to play with. Rushing to give her some treats, Hana simply cries more, but Mishimo promises to find Sakamoto and the others, only to send Paisuke off for some recon work. In the basement level 4, director Asakura introduces himself to Liu, but having mistaken him for the bad guy, Liu rushes to choke Asakura. With Asakura clarifying he's a good guy, we cut back to Sakamoto and Shin, who notice Horiguchi still standing, amazed to have finally met the legendary Hitman. Horiguchi is disappointed at how far Sakamoto has fallen, revealing that he had stuck a needle in Sakamoto as well. But as Sakamoto rushes to engage Horiguchi, Sakamoto's fist suddenly lands on Shin instead. Weirded out, Sakamoto hears that the needle Horiguchi stuck in him confuses the brain and switches enemies with foes. But before Horiguchi can boast anymore, Sakamoto smashes him with another heavy punch. Having aimed for Shin, Sakamoto works around Horiguchi's little trick, but Horiguchi simply gets back up, more excited to test out his experiments. Cutting to Liu, she hears that Asakura had been locked up because he disobeyed orders, but Liu gets annoyed, choosing to vent her frustration on Tanaka, the person who mistook her for Shin. Hearing Shin's name, Asakura reveals he was the one who gave Shin his psychic abilities, blaming himself for ruining the brat's life. Flashing back, we see a younger-looking Asakura forced to babysit a bratty Shin, both disliking each other, all whilst Asakura continued his research into the supernatural. One day, Ando, his acquaintance, had left Shin to Asakura, only to suddenly disappear. That night, Asakura grows more frustrated at the lack of breakthroughs in his research, only to see Shin curious in his research. Asakura mentions how although he has yet to uncover anything supernatural, he still holds out hope to be the first to revolutionize humanity, something Shin thinks is very cool. As Shin and Asakura spend more time together, Asakura becomes more drained, having to juggle babysitting Shin and continuing his research, passing through the lab one day only to hear fellow researchers mock Asakura's unrealistic research. Surprisingly, Shin stands up for Asakura, but later that night, Asakura finally manages to create a mixture that may change his career. At that moment, a tired Shin enters the lab, choosing to drink the newly created mixture, seeing as he is thirsty. But as Asakura rushes to check on Shin, Shin simply begins to vomit. The next day, Asakura sees no abnormal signs from Shin, but out of nowhere Shin states that he's not okay, having been able to read Asakura's mind. In the following days, Shin would tease Mr. Tada for fantasizing about Miss Namiki, horrifying Asakura as the lab members run several more tests on Shin. Over time, the lab members grew distant from Shin, denoting how Shin's powers are actually quite creepy. Not wanting Shin to live an isolated life, Asakura rushes to come up with a cure for Shin's powers. But when Shin asks if Asakura is proud of his greatest work, Asakura apologizes, having never wanted Shin to be tangled up in his research. Frustrated, Shin pushes Asakura aside, running away several days later, something that makes Lu and Tanaka bawl, hearing such a sad story. Lu reassures Asakura that Shin doesn't hate him, mentioning how Shin has grown used to his powers. Lu suggests for Asakura and herself to apologize to Shin, seeing as both of them fought with Shin, but Lu brings up Rule 11 of the Sakamoto family, uttering that anytime people fight, they should make up not long after. Laughing at his own pathetic attitude, Asakura reveals a vial of acid he can use to melt through the jail bars, only to ask if Shin has grown taller. Having alerted a guard, Asakura and Tanaka stand ready to face the guard, but in a moment Lu dispatches the guard, declaring that they'll begin making their way to where Shin is. Back with Sakamoto, he's seen misfiring onto Shin, having learnt that Horiguchi can choose to turn on and off the needle, interfering with Sakamoto's attacks. Running through his experiments, Horiguchi unveils a trick to make his arm grow muscular, leaping in close only to smash the ground in front of Sakamoto and Shin. Before Shin can retaliate, Horiguchi simply activates Shin's needle, forcing Shin to attack Sakamoto instead. Unveiling another trick, Horiguchi increased his leg speed, dashing behind Shin only to send him flying through a glass wall. Seeing Sakamoto attempt a sneak attack from behind, Horiguchi manages to freeze Sakamoto in place only to blow him back. Seeing Horiguchi mocking Sakamoto, Shin reminds Horiguchi he can read minds, but getting annoyed, Horiguchi simply assaults Shin with several needle stabs, sending him onto the floor. Horiguchi does wonder why his boss is after Shin's stupid skill, something that enrages Shin, but Sakamoto reminds Shin to not be so emotional. Sakamoto declares he'll show Horiguchi why Shin's powers aren't stupid, prompting Horiguchi to inject himself with several needles, suddenly bloating up as his figure becomes monstrous. With Sakamoto coming up with an idea, he orders Shin to stand in front of Horiguchi, all whilst turning his back to him. When Horiguchi tries to attack, Sakamoto simply starts his own barrage targeted at Shin, but as Shin reads Sakamoto's mind, he dodges Sakamoto's attacks, allowing Sakamoto to wail onto Horiguchi. Unable to find a counterplay, Horiguchi is ultimately beaten up and knocked aside, shriveling up as he's been defeated. As the lab members tidy up the mess, Tada and Namiki help remove the needles in Shin and Sakamoto. With Shin and the lab members catching up, they begin heading toward the 4th floor where Lu is being held, all while Shin hears that an order member could easily take out 10 Shins in a mere 6 seconds. Shin is annoyed that Nagumo is an order member, but out of nowhere our duo runs over a trapdoor, forcing Sakamoto to kick Shin aside, all whilst he falls into the trap. Cutting to the 5th basement floor, we see Kashima escorted by Onigahara and Takamito, all three noticing a pile of bodies with Shishiba and Osaraji as the culprits. Kashima demands to know why order members are here, hearing that the order are after a slur character, but sadly Kashima has no idea what they're talking about. Before Shishiba leaves, he mentions how manufacturing illegal weapons is a violation against the JA, glaring at Kashima as he states he'll have to dispose of him. Before Shishiba can take another step, Onigahara and Takamito blink in front of Shishiba, asking for permission to slay Shishiba. Before Kashima can give the order, Osaraji pierces and decapitates the men in an instant. When Shishiba turns to Kashima, he's surprised to see Kashima in tears, having felt sorry for the men that passed away before him. Taking off his deer mask, Kashima unravels some stitches in his arms only to show off several blades in place of his hand. Shishiba and Osaraji are disgusted to see a killer scold them for taking another's life. But out of nowhere, Kashima manages to land a slash onto Shishiba, declaring that his boss pardons his kills. Retaliating, Shishiba twists and breaks Kashima's neck, confirming that Kashima is connected to Slur. As the duo leave, they suddenly sense Kashima getting back up, uttering that he has an artificial skeleton, but out of nowhere Sakamoto falls onto Kashima. Surprised, Shishiba nonchalantly greets Sakamoto, introducing Osaraji to Sakamoto, who considers Sakamoto as a big teddy bear. Sakamoto hears that Kashima is the evil boss of the labs, pissing Kashima off as he declares he'll offer Sakamoto's head to his boss, all whilst Kashima continues to unravel his weapon-filled body. As Osaraji continues to admire Sakamoto's adorable body, we cut to Shin, who is making his way to the 4th floor, suddenly leaping back as he detects that Seiba is attacking him. As Seiba rushes to claim Shin's head, Shin attempts to read Seiba's mind, but is knocked back, unable to see where the attack is coming from. With Shin getting destroyed by Seiba, we cut back to Sakamoto, who watches Kashima latching onto him with some grapples, only to be forced to dodge Kashima's beam breath. Seeing as Sakamoto is fighting Kashima, Shishiba and Osaraji leave to track down Slur, but Osaraji gets worried that Sakamoto will be slayed. Luckily, Shishiba states that Sakamoto isn't the type to ever die, but as we cut back to Shin, he's seen on the brink of death, having endured a beating. When Seiba lunges in for a lethal blow, Shin suddenly spots Paisuk nearby, choosing to tank the stab only to wipe some of his blood onto Seiba. In an instant, Seiba is pierced by several bullets, revealed to be Mishima, who has come to save the day. Seeing Kashima mocking his family and is dead set on hunting them down, Sakamoto chooses to take out a pen, dashing in close before Kashima can fire off another beam, only to plug the weapon with his pen. As the weapon backfires on Kashima, Sakamoto asks that Kashima refrain from insulting his family, all whilst Liu and the others hold Tanaka hostage, seeing as several more guards are searching for them. Back with Shin, he is glad to see Mishimo is here to assist, but as for Seiba, he wonders why a sniper would even show himself, suddenly caught off guard when Mishimo fires his ricocheting bullets to attack Seiba, who is hiding. Realizing that Mishimo has found his hiding spot, Seiba activates his stealth, attempting to flee, but Mishimo simply fires off bullets to tear down the railing Seiba is on. As the smoke clears, Mishimo spots Seiba standing on a railing, preparing to slay Seiba, but having wrapped a pipe in his invisible suit, Seiba tosses the pipe at Mishimo's shoulder. Having pierced Mishimo's shoulder, Seiba rushes to pin down and slay Mishimo, but Mishimo manages to get off another ricocheting shot, able to pierce and tear off one of Seiba's arms. Before Mishimo can ready another shot, Seiba reveals he was only concealing his lost arm, thrusting his blade into Mishimo's stomach only to kick away Mishimo's remaining ammo. Before Seiba can deal with Shin, Kashima cries that they'll be taking out Seiba here and now, only to order Paisuk to deliver one final bullet. Having fired off a bullet that missed Seiba, Seiba mocks Kashima's pathetic attempt, but is surprised to see that Kashima was actually aiming at a sprinkler above him. As the water disarms Seiba's invisibility, Shin rushes in to grapple and pins Seiba down, officially knocking him out. Out of nowhere, several explosions can be heard across the lab, but as we cut back to Sakamoto, he hears that Kashima has rigged up several explosions that will wipe out the lab in 20 minutes. Getting serious, Sakamoto states he'll only need 5 to defeat Kashima, beckoning Kashima to rush in for an attack. But having easily dodged, Sakamoto hears that Kashima's body has been replaced with various weapons making up 70% of his body. Impressed, Sakamoto takes out weapons of his own, showing off some stickers, a mechanical pencil, and a flyer. Insulted, Kashima lets loose several projectiles. But as Sakamoto evades the projectiles, he retaliates by flinging the pen's lead into Kashima's eye. Falling to his knees, Kashima's eye begins to bleed, but having followed up with a sticker to his other eyes, Sakamoto manages to obscure Kashima's vision, only to land a powerful whip that sends Kashima flying. Seeing Kashima unfazed, Sakamoto wonders if Kashima is immortal, hearing that Slur was the only one that valued Kashima, therefore Kashima will give his life for Slur. As a train approaches Kashima from behind, both Sakamoto and Kashima leap to avoid it. But having landed on the train, Kashima chooses to bind and drag Sakamoto along the tracks. Annoyed by Sakamoto's carefree attitude, Kashima watches as Sakamoto slices the metal bindings with a flyer, only to fling Kashima into a nearby wall using the same binds extruding from Kashima's body. In a separate tunnel, an underground subway suddenly spots Sakamoto tackling Kashima through a wall, prompting both men to fly through the subway carriages. Looking around, Kashima downs a drink, confirming that Sakamoto is truly a legendary hitman, able to mask his presence and blend in with the crowd. Having snuck beside Kashima, Sakamoto lands a disgusting kick onto Kashima, glad to see he can go all out seeing as Kashima is immortal. Flashing back, we see a younger-looking Kashima being berated for beating up men that were torturing a cat, but often the crowd Slur passes by, dispatching the onlookers glaring at Kashima. Having praised Kashima for slaying for the better of others, Slur marks Kashima's lips with his signature cross, officially deeming Kashima as his own property. In the present, Kashima declares he'll slay all that gets in his way. But seeing an elderly woman enter the carriage, Sakamoto drags Kashima into the section between carriages only to begin barraging Kashima with hundreds of punches. With the carriage unable to withstand Sakamoto's power, Kashima is forced into a separate carriage, attempting to spray down Sakamoto with bullets. But Sakamoto simply deflects them all with a railing. Using the railing to smack Kashima around, Kashima leaps back only to unveil a massive weapon in his chest, managing to blow Sakamoto out of their current train onto an adjacent one. Monstrously, Sakamoto recovers, sprinting along the adjacent train only to hop back onto his original train. With Kashima sitting down to relax, he horrifically sees Sakamoto coldly enter the cabin, rushing to pick up nearby passengers only to toss them at Sakamoto. Sadly, Sakamoto nonchalantly catches and places the passengers back down. But choosing to end their duel, Sakamoto combos Kashima with several strikes only to drag his unconscious body out of Sato Station. Reporting the good news to Shin, Sakamoto hears that he has 15 minutes left until the lab explodes. Choosing to toss Kashima's corpse aside, all whilst we cut to Lu, who saves a researcher from a piece of falling debris. Before Lu can think of a way out of the lab, a piece of the ceiling falls on her, forcing Shin to tackle and save Lu. As Mishimo joins them, we see Lu and Shin are awkward at first, but suddenly Lu breaks down apologizing for stealing Shin's apron earlier. Having made up, Asakura greets Shin as well, both feeling awkward as it's been a while, but Shin reminds everyone they only have 10 minutes to spare. Seeing as they need to save everyone, Shin asks Asakura to sketch out the floor plan of the lab, focusing only to ask Lu and Mishimo to rescue some people still trapped in the lab. As for Shin and Asakura, they head elsewhere, all whilst Asakura appreciates Shin's control over his powers, reminiscing on the times they would spend together. At the same time, we see Shishiba and Osaraji scrubbing through the lab surveillance, only to confirm that Slur is the mastermind behind the lab's takeover. Back with Shin, he sends Asakura to help someone all whilst Shin continues forward, but as Shin begins to approach a man, he suddenly halts seeing the man's cold presence. Suddenly sensing his own demise, Shin freezes all while Slur passes by Shin, asking Shin to say hello to Sakamoto for him. Having saved everyone, Shin and Asakura meet up with the lab researchers outside, flustered to see everyone admiring how much Shin has grown. Taking the chance to introduce himself to Sakamoto, Asakura thanks Sakamoto for raising Shin in his absence, only to cut to later that night, where the entire family has finally regrouped for a nice homely dinner. As Shin and Lu continue to bicker, Shin suddenly gets terrified, seeing that Sakamoto wants to silence them in his head. With a few days passing, Shin and Lu voice how exhausted they're from surviving the lab incident, giving Sakamoto the idea to take his family to a natural hot spring to decompress. Shin gets worried, revealing that he can't read minds at the moment, but Sakamoto states that Shin's #1 priority is to rest and recover. As the gang head inside, Shin mentions how he's never been to a hot spring before, but at the same time we see Yutaro manning the reception, annoyed he had to come back and work at his parents' hot spring. When Sakamoto asks to pay to use the hot spring, Yutaro notes how familiar Sakamoto looks. But before Yutaro can say anything, he rushes to retrieve some towels for the Sakamoto family. Swiftly picking up a flyer, Yutaro confirms that the legendary Hitman is before him, quivering in fear seeing as an amateur hitman like himself is standing before God. With Yutaro fixated on the $1 billion bounty, we cut to a few moments later where Sakamoto and Shin are changing before they enter the hot spring, all whilst Yutaro pumps himself to slay the legend himself. As Sakamoto and Shin clean and rinse themselves off, Yutaro admires Sakamoto's quick handwork, only to watch the duo enter a jet bath, something that makes Shin tingle. Hearing Sakamoto not pleased by the jets, Shin reaches for a button to increase the jet's pressure, but at the same time, Yutaro triggers an explosion attempting to sweep away Sakamoto. With Shin launched into the air by the explosion, he accidentally slips on some soap, only to be flung into a wall. Yutaro admires his explosive trap, but having scanned the area for Sakamoto, Yutaro horrifically witnesses Sakamoto enduring the high-powered jets as if they were nothing. Up next, the boys move into the sauna, prompting Shin to reach for some water as he plans on heating up the room a bit more. Seeing Shin pouring the water onto some hot coals, Yutaro suddenly ignites the hot rocks, blasting the room with hot steamy air that sets the wooden room on fire. But seeing Sakamoto relaxed, Yutaro curses at Sakamoto's thick skin. Seeing as Shin had fainted, Sakamoto reasons they should cool off with a cold bath, but Yutaro attempts to freeze our duo to death. Having failed, Yutaro catches our duo enjoying a shower, blasting them with some torrential downfall, only to repeat the cycle of burning and freezing them. But nothing affects Sakamoto. Retrieving Shin, Sakamoto returns to the girls, placing Shin in a massage chair only to purchase some ice cream. Off to the side, Yutaro is pissed that none of his tricks had fazed Sakamoto, but as Hana asks to play some ping pong, we see Lu impressing Sakamoto with her swift paddle skills. Yutaro thinks about how he doesn't want to take over his parents' bathhouse when he grows up, having gotten into many arguments with his father where he ends up storming off, but having failed as a hitman, Yutaro eventually gave in. At that moment, Yakin and Manshin begin laughing at Yutaro for always talking big, but wound up returning to work for his family's bathhouse. When Yutaro tries standing up for himself, Yakin slaps Yutaro to the ground, pinning him down only to begin mocking Yutaro's pathetic state. Pissed, Yutaro warns the bullies to not make fun of his family's bathhouse, but sadly Yutaro stands no chance against the bullies. Having heard everything, Sakamoto chooses to hit the ping pong ball towards Yakin, blasting him away from Yutaro only to fall unconscious by the impact with the floor. Next up, Sakamoto finishes up his ice cream, choosing to toss the ice cream handle at Manshin's blazer, pinning him to a nearby vending machine, which knocks him out. Grateful for Sakamoto's help, Yutaro realizes Sakamoto knew all along about his assassination attempts. But before Yutaro can apologize, Sakamoto cuts him off, instead complimenting the bathhouse's innovative designs, promising to return with his family in the future. Blessed to have been praised by the legend himself, Yutaro chooses to phone his father, finally agreeing to take over the family business and run the bathhouse. Elsewhere, we see several mysterious figures arriving in Japan, all dead set on retrieving a specific girl. At the same time, we follow Sakamoto eating out with Shin and Lu, who both play a guessing game to decide who pays for the meal. Sadly, Shin loses. Lu laments how she rarely visits family diners since her family would often serve her gourmet meals at home, but Lu couldn't be more happy with her laid-back life as it is. But out of nowhere, two men raise their guns at Shin and Sakamoto, with one of the men firing a bullet at Sakamoto's skull. Sakamoto swiftly blocks the bullet with his fork, dragging and slamming him onto the table, all while Shin knocks out his attacker. Needing a drink, Sakamoto orders a melon soda, but Wutong Lu mocks Sakamoto for his poor choice in drink, surprising Lu as she recognizes Wutong's voice. Surprised to see a member of her clan alive, Wutong reveals that their clan is in need of a leader, advising Lu to stay away from the life of a barbaric hitman. But Lu refuses to rejoin their family mafia. Seeing Lu up in clothes, Wu-Tong explodes with a bloody nose, flustered over how cute Lu is. But Lu utters that since she was young, Wu-Tong would always follow her around, supposedly taking on the role of advisor to her family. Reading Wu-Tong's mind, Shin is freaked out by how creepy Wu-Tong is, but upon hearing that Lu refuses to return to the Lu clan, Wu-Tong declares Sakamoto his sworn enemy. Wu-Tong states he wants to fight over who gets Lu, offering up information on who placed the 1 billion bounty on Sakamoto's head. But without a moment's thought, both Shin and Sakamoto call off the duel, seeing as they can get that information themselves. Seeing an opportunity to pay Sakamoto back, Lu agrees to Wu-Tong's offer, all following Wu-Tong as we cut to later that night, where Wu-Tong leads our trio underground. Entering a room, Wu-Tong orders Shin and Sakamoto to get changed, giving the boys nicely fitted suits, all whilst Lu dons an elegant dress. Entering another room, Wu-Tong introduces our trio to an underground casino, declaring that no physical fight will be needed as he hands Sakamoto 30 million yen to start off with, and the winner of their duel will be the one with the greater amount when they return. Setting a timer of 2 hours, Wu-Tong heads off, all while Sakamoto reassures Lu that they have Shin to give them an advantage. Hearing that Sakamoto and Shin have never gambled before, Lu begins to get stressed, especially since Wu-Tong himself is quite smart. But out of nowhere, an audience forms around Wu-Tong, seeing as he's tripled his 30 million yen in mere moments, pumping the boys up as they refuse to lose. As our trio wonder how they should tackle Wu-Tong's challenge, Lu reveals that gambling is more than just luck, something Wu-Tong confirms as he declares that calculations are a big part of what separates Mafia from Hitman. Speaking up, Sakamoto corrects Wu-Tong, uttering that hitmen don't rely on luck either to survive. But as we follow Shin, we see him sitting in on his first game, having never gambled before. Within seconds, the other gamblers deduce that Shin is a sitting duck, all declaring they'll squeeze Shin for his money. Annoyed, Shin watches as the players around him call and raise. But having seen his 2-card, Shin is still confused about what to do. Checking on Shin, Lu mocks Shin for looking so scared, only to begin fighting with Shin, accidentally showing Shin's cards to the other players. The players recognize that Shin has got a pretty strong hand, but getting greedy, the players all utter that they'll bluff Shin. Sadly, Shin has been reading their mind, countering by going all in. In mere seconds, Shin is up 12 million yen with a total of 22 million yen, giving Shin the confidence to take on the gamblers head-on. At the same time, we follow Sakamoto joining in on a roulette game, choosing to place his entire bet on red, but the game handler secretly notes how he can control where the ball will land. Having kept a single chip for himself, Sakamoto watches closely for the ball to briefly graze a red tile, instantly firing off his last chip to stop the roulette from spinning, shocking everyone as Sakamoto's new total is 29 million yen. Cutting to Wu-Tong, he receives word of our trio slowly winning more money, but even though Wu-Tong knows they must be cheating, he allows them to continue. Deep in thought, Wu-Tong is revealed to be cheating as well, having been counting cards during blackjack. Wu-Tong remembers a time when he was bullied for not meeting the standards of his clan, but Lu herself had fended off Wu-Tong's attackers, both sitting down as Lu realizes Wu-Tong is related to her. Lu wonders why Wu-Tong didn't fight off his attackers, but not wanting to be embarrassed, Wu-Tong makes up a pathetic excuse covering for the fact that he was too weak, but surprisingly Lu buys it, calling Wu-Tong a genius. Ever since then, Wu-Tong vowed to hone his brain to make up for his lack of fighting skills, dreaming of the day he can stand beside Lu. As the 2-hour timer ends, we see both parties manage to gather 87,630 chips, but seeing as they'll need a tie-breaking game, Lu herself asks to play Old Maid. Having added 2 men to Wu-Tong's team for a 3-on-3, the loser will be the last one standing with the Joker card, exciting our trio as they are quite familiar with such a simple game. As the game starts, Shin scans the players to see who has the Joker card, horrifying Sakamoto and Shin when they realize Lu is in possession of the Joker. Picking first, Wu-Tong mentions how he can read Lu like a book, hovering over Lu's cards only to purposely remove the Joker from Lu's hand. Up next, Shin picks from Wutong's hand, but as Shin reads Wutong's mind, he hears that Wutong knows of his psychic abilities. In mere moments, Wutong overwhelms Shin with an influx of new information, overheating Shin's mind and knocking him out of the game. With several turns passing, Sakamoto is up next to pick, annoying one of Wutong's men, but having sped up, Sakamoto had picked the Joker card only to swap it out for a safe card using his super speed. Although Wutong couldn't see his movements, he warned Sakamoto against cheating, but as we cut to the final two players, we see it's Sakamoto against Wutong. But Sakamoto has the Joker, leaving Wutong to pick. Although Sakamoto has a poker face, Wutong is still able to read Sakamoto's intentions, swiftly reaching for the final non-Joker card. But Sakamoto grips onto the card for dear life. Wutong struggles to rip the card out of Sakamoto's hand, but seeing an opening, Sakamoto switches the card for the Joker, annoying Wutong. At that moment, Wutong's men raise their weapons at Sakamoto, but more importantly, Wutong's men remind Wutong that they're the Mafia and that they're meant to take the things they want, not play games for them. Hearing his men speak so lowly of him, Wutong gets flashbacks of being ostracized in his past, allowing his trauma to get the better of him as he accepts his demise. Speaking up, Sakamoto reminds Wutong he can still impress Lu, exciting Wutong as he bluffs that the guns his men were holding were meant to blow up when they fired. Having distracted the men long enough, Sakamoto and Lu get to work dispatching the armed men, tossing and knocking them away, ultimately managing to take down the army with the use of a pool stick and pool balls. As for the final man, Wutong reveals his bluff by firing off one of the supposed rigged guns, admitting defeat as Wutong utters he doesn't deserve to stand by Lu's side. Sakamoto states that he doesn't want to decide what happens to Wutong's and Lu's relationship, empathizing with Wutong as Sakamoto has a family to love and protect as well. Returning to Sakamoto's shop, Wutong is seen being hired by Sakamoto, but having lost their duel, Wutong agrees to give Sakamoto information on Slur. Our trio utter that they already knew it had something to do with Slur, but Wutong adds that a prison in Southeast Asia reported murders of inmates on death row, all having their faces burn off with Slur's signature marking left in the aftermath. Shin wonders why Slur would attack a random prison, but Wutong mentions how similar cases have been reported in Japan, one where the victim had holes placed in their body, one where the victim had all his flesh removed, another where the victim was dismembered, and a final one where the victim was compressed into a ball. With Lu disgusted, Shin asks what this has to do with Slur, but Wutong suspects that the 4 inmates must have faked their deaths and escaped into Japan. Elsewhere, we follow the 4 escaped inmates. Dump, who has racked up 180 kills, Saw, who has 64 kills, Apart, who has 206 kills, and finally Minimalist, who has 370 kills. As the gang waits for a messenger, we see Minimalist compressing a burger into a ball only to devour it. But out of nowhere, Kashima appears only to hand the gang a list of people he wants eliminated. Scanning the list, the inmates mock Sakamoto as being a possible threat, but Kashima warns the inmates not to underestimate anyone on their hit list. Pissed that Kashima is looking down on them, Minimalist crushes up his table only to declare they'll wrap things up in a month. But as they leave the scene, Kashima acknowledges the inmates as pure evil. At night, Wutong asks our trio to leave the country immediately, but instead our trio begin making plans to deal with the dangerous inmates who are running amok in their country, reminding Wutong that leaving the inmates alone is the opposite of what is right. In a strange-looking building, we follow a man fleeing for his life, but having tripped over a corpse, the man watches as Dump appears before him. Dump says the man is cute, closing the distance to embrace him, but her excitement causes her to slay the man. At the same time, we see Apart shredding a fellow hitman, nonchalantly organizing the pieces of the man's body, only to help the man organize his film collection. Minimalist is seen crushing those who get in his way, yearning for the day he'll get to face off against a S-rank hitman. But as the trio report their hunts in a group chat, we see Saw indulging in the life he was missing, excited to hunt down Sakamoto himself. Apparently, Wutong had promised to look into Slur to help out Sakamoto. Cutting to the present day, where our trio are heading back to the video rental store, only to ask the clerk for intel on the death row inmates. Although the price for such intel is just over 1 million yen, Sakamoto forks over the cash, only for us to cut over to Osaragi and Shishiba, who are driving the other order members. The members begin to discuss the recent appearances of the escaped inmates, but when Osaragi misses a turn on the highway, she comedically reverses as traffic speeds past her. Hyo scolds Osaragi for being inconsiderate to Takamura, who can't handle Osaragi's strange driving, but Osaragi only cares about slaying the inmates that are doing as they please, ironic as Shishiba points out how crazy Osaragi gets when hunting as well. Seeing a fly buzzing around their van, the order members suddenly cry for each other to get low, all watching as Takamura monstrously slays the fly, all whilst decapitating the top of their van, something that gives the order members hope as they declare they'll easily be able to take on the 4 inmates. Back with Sakamoto, we see him sleeping through the intel he bought, but as we cut to the coming days, we see Mishimo training with Sakamoto. Impressed Sakamoto was able to catch 99 of his 100 bullets shot with some mere chopsticks. At that moment, Shin arrives, complimenting how sharp Sakamoto is, but out of nowhere Shin attempts to stab Sakamoto with his blade. Having caught the blade, Sakamoto asks why Nagumo is here, but Nagumo simply asks Sakamoto to stop looking for the inmates, seeing as the order members have been tasked with hunting them down. Hearing that Sakamoto wants to question them for information on Slur, Nagumo reminds Sakamoto how dangerous it is, revealing that Sakamoto is considered a B-rank threat, all whilst Nagumo himself is S-rank. Following Shin and Lu, they're out shopping for home improvement goods, but seeing Lu so nonchalant, Shin reminds Lu that they need to get stronger for Sakamoto's sake. As Lu cuddles with a cat, we see the store clerk offer Shin some puppies to snuggle with. But as Shin takes a liking to Machi, the Shiba Inu, the animals in the store begin to act strange. Off in the corner of the store, we see Saw nonchalantly admiring the animals, and when Shin asks who Saw is, he utters that he was an ex-militant. As our duo approach Saw suddenly retrieves his axe, nonchalantly blowing Shin through some shelves. Lu is horrified by Saw's sheer strength, and having caused a commotion, we see the other customers clear the scene, all whilst Shin recovers from his attack. Saw is impressed Shin wasn't cut in two by his axe, surprised Shin had blocked his slash with a crowbar. But regardless, Saw isn't too worried seeing as Shin is a D-rank hitman, whilst Lu is a C-rank. Shin is shocked that his rank is lower than Lu, something Saw rubs in seeing as D-rank is the second lowest rank, but this only pisses Shin off. As Shin charges straight for Saw declares he'll cut Shin at the waist, but having read his mind, Shin blocks with a bag of animal treats, only to send out a kick that whiplashes Saw's head. Shin says his rank will become better once he defeats Saw. But as Saw recovers from Shin's kick, he slowly heads over to his bags, only to retrieve some rope. Saw says everyone he's slain had appreciated his actions, choosing to tie the rope onto his axe to spice things up, and when Shin tries reading Saw's mind, he's petrified to see that Saw's mind is clouded with only killing intent. Swinging the rope towards our duo, Saw's axe shreds the surrounding area, forcing our duo to stay on the defensive as they notice Saw hot on their tracks. Unable to predict Saw's movements, Shin and Lu rack their brains for a way to fight back, but seeing Saw's axe in front of them, Shin tackles Lu to evade a lethal attack, accidentally sustaining some damage in the process. Saw mocks Shin for being unable to read his mind, but out of nowhere Lu draws Saw away by firing some nails at him with her nail gun, giving Shin the opening to blast Saw with a makeshift flamethrower. Sadly, even such an attack can barely phase Saw, freaking out our duo. As Saw tosses his axe at our duo, he purposely aims for the propane tank behind them, creating a massive explosion, but this time Lu tackles Shin out of the impact zone. Saw chooses to douse himself in some ethanol to cleanse his wounds, tossing the remainder of the bottle towards Lu, but Shin begins to panic seeing Lu unresponsive. Shin blames himself for being so weak, cutting over to Mishimo, who asks Sakamoto if Shin was his strongest partner, making Sakamoto admit that Shin has the potential to grow and is someone very strong if puts his mind to it. Back with Shin, He is helplessly thrown around by Saw, who offers to carve open his head to study Shin's brain. But when Shin hears Saw will be hunting the Sakamotos next, Shin can't help but feel guilty. Hearing that Saw will take great pleasure in tearing the Sakamotos apart, Shin begins to boil over, suddenly feeling a weird sensation as his senses have become heightened. As Saw swings his blade at Shin's back, Saw is surprised to see Shin was able to evade his attack, beginning to feel a strange aura from Shin. When Saw tries swinging his axe again, Shin magically blocks the blow, declaring that he can see Saw's future, only to throw out a flurry of punches that knock Saw down. Saw gets weirded out by how Shin is acting, attempting to swing his rope to attack Shin from afar, but Shin closes the gap, hitting Saw once more. With every strike, Saw helplessly slashes the air, annoyed to see that Shin truly is able to see his attacks before he can make them. As Shin hits Saw with a lethal blow, he sends Saw crashing into the ground below, all whilst thanking Saw for being the catalyst to his awakening. Flashing back, Wutong warns the gang that the criminals have already begun to make their move, revealing that the criminals' readiness potential is something they need to assess, especially since it may mean life or death. In the present, we see Shin rushing in for the final blow, but before Shin can finish Saw off, he suddenly loses control of his body. Having fatigued due to his new skill, Shin allows Saw to bind him and pull him towards his blade, but when Saw looks to capitalize, Liu appears, knocking Saw aside. Shin is weirded out to see Liu so serious, but upon discovering a bottle of opened ethanol, Shin realizes Liu must have drank it to enter into her drunken state. Saw admits he wasn't expecting such lowly hitmen to give him such trouble, but the drunken Liu declares her mafia fighting style will shock Saw. Saw starts off by swinging his axe towards Liu, but this time Liu heads towards the eye of the storm, taking a hold of the rope only to swing Saw's axe back onto himself. Seeing as he's lost track of Liu, Saw receives a devastating knee to the head, forcing Saw's mind to go blank, allowing Liu to slam and pin Saw onto the ground. Liu says she'll cut off a finger for each of Saw's victims, starting off by driving a mini shovel into Saw's arm, but Saw suddenly begins to beg for his life. Liu says Saw has no right to cry for help, something that scares Saw as he begins to flee the scene. But Liu manically chases after her prey. Saw says he wants to live so he can slay more people, but having read his mind, Shin intercepts and hammers Saw with a steel ladder, officially knocking Saw out. Cutting over to a temple, we see Shishiba and Osaragi enjoying a meal, both upset that one of the 4 inmates have been taken out already. Suddenly, they receive a call from Nagomo, who says he has found his target, reminding the pair that they can assist him if they want. Getting excited, Osaragi stuffs herself with as much food as she can, offering up the remainder to Shishiba only to run off towards her assigned destination. Back with Shin and Liu, we see they've both knocked out, giving Saw the perfect chance to escape his binds. Saw chooses to frantically board a taxi, threatening the driver to take him to the airport, but as Saw enters the taxi, he realizes that Hyo had been waiting in the back all along. With blood splatters filling the taxi, we cut back to Liu and Shin, who panic upon realizing that Saw had escaped, but sadly they can barely move, having sustained too much damage. Right on cue, the JAA's cleanup crew appear, announcing that Saw is dead. Shin recognizes the cleanup crew to be floaters that take care of the aftermath of a hit, and seeing as they've been fighting for too long, they quickly hurry back to Sakamoto's. Cutting over to Osaragi, she is seen praying at the temple, wishing out loud that she can successfully hunt down the inmates. But out of nowhere, Dump appears beside her. Dump chooses to rail Osaragi into the nearby shrine with a spike from her palm, all whilst wondering why people close their eyes when they pray. But having blocked Dump's attack with a coin, Osaragi says her prayer has been answered. Osaragi suddenly dashes behind Dump, choosing to educate her by bashing her head into a nearby statue, twice since prayers start with 2 bows. Next, Osaragi slaps Dump's face twice to symbolize 2 claps, and to top things off, Osaragi pile drives Dump into the ground to wrap up their prayer with another bow. Dump manages to bounce back from the attacks, getting excited to face a formidable foe, all while Shishiba wonders where Osaragi has run off to. Osaragi notices Dump erecting several spikes from her body. But Osaragi asks Dump to give herself in, something that annoys Dump as she strikes Osaragi with her spikes. Dump says it's unfair that she was given the death sentence after loving many people, accusing Osaragi for sharing similar intentions when hunting people down, but Osaragi is revealed to have blocked the spikes with her briefcase. Osaragi says she simply follows the will of the association. Plus, she says Dump is nothing more than a fly to her, pissing Dump off as she forces Osaragi to evade her advances, all whilst managing to disarm Osaragi of her heavy-looking briefcase. As Dump advances towards Osaragi, she demands that Osaragi retaliate, but Osaragi seems to be observing the number of spikes Dump has at her disposal. Osaragi fears that Dump may have more spikes hidden, choosing to borrow the temple's bell only to propel the bell towards Dump with a kick, something that sends Dump flying through the shrine and onto the ground below. Dump is annoyed at Osaragi's movement, suddenly noticing Osaragi checking her fortune before her, something that gives Dump the chance to sneak up on her and attack with her spikes. Having pinned Osaragi against a tree with a spike to her hand, Osaragi utters that it's weird for gods to create monsters like Dump and herself, and when Dump orders for Osaragi to cower in fear, Osaragi monstrously deepens her wound in order to reach Dump. Managing to grasp a hold of Dump's hand, Osaragi lands a powerful kick on a Dump, something that makes Dump reminisce on life, as her spikes were always a deterrent to the one she loved. Dump says every time she showed affection to someone, they would simply be slain by her spikes, something that forced her to give into her curse. In the present, Dump refuses to give in as she chases after Osaragi, but with each advance, she is sent flying by Osaragi's sheer strength. Dump declares she'll make Osaragi her next love, helplessly being thrown back and knocked aside, all whilst Osaragi coldly marches towards Dump. Dump cries that it's unfair she was unable to express her love to the people she cared about. But having heard enough, Osaragi retrieves her suitcase only to unveil her buzzsaw. Osaragi reminds Dump that she is just like her, and it's thanks to killers like Dump that Osaragi has a reason to live, something that touches Dump as Osaragi blitzes towards Dump, instantly ending their duel. Elsewhere, we see Mishimo high up in a sky tower, declaring that he'll help track down the inmates. At the same time, we cut over to Kashima, who receives word of 2 of the inmates passing, but he could care less, declaring that the inmates have drawn the attention of the Order members, giving them the chance to proceed with their grand scheme. In his room, Kashima is suddenly caught off guard by a part who had been waiting for him, demanding to know what Kashima's greater schemes are. Kashima tries brushing off the question, a little pissed that a part is turning on him, but a part says he'll live his life how he sees fit, suddenly dicing up Kashima's body. As a part leaves, Kashima is annoyed that a part has gone rogue on them, swiftly apologizing to X for his miscalculation, but X reassures Kashima that such a misstep is fine. Elsewhere, we follow Minimalist entering Sakamoto's store, all whilst Aoi is seen manning the counter. As Minimalist approaches the counter, Aoi asks how she can help him. Back with Sakamoto, we see he has brought Shin to Granny Mia for some acupuncture to help recover from his fight with Saw. Mia was surprised to see how big Sakamoto has gotten. A little annoyed she has to work on Shin, but Sakamoto says Mia was the only one that could help Shin, having been granted the title of Hand of God by all hitmen with the ability to heal almost any wound. Mia says Shin needs to keep the acupuncture pins in the whole day, and based on her analysis, Shin can use his new power for 5 minutes max each day. As for Lu, Mia served her some miso soup to help cleanse the alcohol from her body, only for Mia to offer to give Sakamoto a checkup. With Mia sifting through Sakamoto's body, she says it's surprising to see Sakamoto working as a team, but she warns Sakamoto to not seek revenge as she can sense anger emanating from Sakamoto's body. Mia utters that Sakamoto is only 30% as strong as he used to be, a sad revelation seeing as Nagumo is stronger than Sakamoto whilst he is still so big. With Sakamoto refusing to let anyone else get hurt, he begins to leave, but Mia strikes his tandem point on his stomach, ultimately finishing her checkup on Sakamoto. As Sakamoto leaves Mia to deal with Shin and Lu, We cut back to Minimalist interrogating Aoi for Sakamoto's whereabouts, but she says Sakamoto is currently at the physical therapist. Pissed, Minimalist crushes the till in front of them, but Aoi doesn't seem frightened at all. Ripping apart the checkout counter, Minimalist begins to strangle Aoi, but before he can harm Aoi, she throws out a punch that dislocates Minimalist's lead arm. Following up, Aoi stabs Minimalist in the neck, dropping him. Revealed to be Nagumo disguised as Aoi. Nagumo says Minimalist is lucky since he was using a toy knife, but as Minimalist prepares to brawl with Nagumo, Nagumo suddenly appears behind him, raising his knife to Minimalist's neck. With Minimalist leaping away, we learn that Nagumo is returning a favor and has been tasked with protecting Aoi and Hana while Sakamoto is out, only to show off a strange suitcase. Cutting over to Mishimo, we see him up in a sky tower, barely able to locate Apart on the ground, all whilst Apart seems to be trying to make friends with strangers. Before Apart can harm anyone, Mishimo takes aim and fires a bullet at Apart, but monstrously Apart blocks the projectile with the wires he has wrapped around his palm. In an instant, Apart ascends the sky tower using his wire, only to smash onto the floor Mishimo is in. Before Mishimo can fire any more shots, Apart slices up his rifle, leaving Mishimo completely defenseless. As Apart struts towards Mishimo, he chooses to bind Mishimo up with his wires, preparing to reveal Mishimo's insides. Right on cue, the elevator stops on their floor, only to reveal Sakamoto, who hits Apart with a devastating punch to blow him away. It's revealed that Mishimo had fired a shot at Sakamoto to signal for help. And as Apart excitedly gets up to brawl with our duo, Sakamoto utters that he is strangely pumped up today. Back with Minimalist, he reveals that he has slain 432 people, wondering if Nagumo could entertain him. When Nagumo makes fun of Minimalist for showing off, Minimalist rushes Nagumo, but Nagumo easily evades, only to ask Minimalist to not destroy too many things. Minimalist is horrified to see Nagumo had swiped his phone, and as Nagumo sifts through Minimalist's search history, Minimalist demands his phone back, all whilst tossing a shelf at Nagumo. Nagumo simply slips the attack, prompting Minimalist to crush up some nearby, shelving to use as projectiles, but Nagumo simply continues to dodge the attacks, all whilst Minimalist wreaks havoc. Having decimated the store, Minimalist ferociously searches the surrounding store for Nagumo, but having transformed into Minimalist himself, Nagumo grabs a hold of the inmate's neck only to drag him into the air. Minimalist is horrified at Nagumo's sheer strength, unable to do anything as Nagumo sifts through his pockets, only to realize Minimalist has nothing interesting on him. As Nagumo tosses Minimalist aside, he unveils a strange-looking weapon hidden in the briefcase, only to ask Minimalist how he wants to be taken out. Nagumo says his weapon has 6 functions, offering Minimalist to pick a number, but this only infuriates him as he rushes Nagumo. Allowing a dice to decide Minimalist's fate, the dice magically shows a 3 in Minimalist's mouth, and within an instant Nagumo lobs off the inmate's head, having used a giant can-opener-like weapon to slay his target. Back with Sakamoto, we see Apart giving him a hard time, especially since Sakamoto can't lose the weight he has put on, wondering what Mia did to him. As Apart swings around and binds Sakamoto with his wires, Apart tries ripping off Sakamoto's leg, but is unable to cut through, ultimately dragging Sakamoto towards him instead. Sakamoto borrows a nearby statue and tries puncturing Apart, but Apart easily nullifies the attack, only to rush toward the display stand to help tidy it up. Seeing Apart distracted, Sakamoto uses the chance to exercise to try to slim down, but even after an intense session, nothing changes. With Apart rushing to bind Sakamoto, he simply slips out of the wires wrapped around him. Saddened to see he has no weapons at his disposal, but strangely his body feels good today. Back with Mia, she utters that Sakamoto's big body and his retirement have definitely dampened his true abilities, declaring that Sakamoto should learn to fight in his new bigger body and not rely on his slimmer one all the time. As Apart fires his wires at Sakamoto, we see Sakamoto dodging them easily, only to be called out by Apart for being a sloppy person. Sakamoto takes note of his slippers that have fallen apart, cutting back to Mia, who scolds Sakamoto for never changing, and that slimming down when he needs to shouldn't be his only solution to deal with his enemies. With Sakamoto finally realizing what Mia was trying to tell him, Mia says her strike to his stomach earlier was to ensure Sakamoto could get a feel of how big his body is, and in a split second Sakamoto appears behind Apart, monstrously slamming Apart into the elevator. Mia says Sakamoto's bigger body is more deadlier than anyone thinks, and as Sakamoto and Apart ride the elevator downwards, many onlookers catch a glimpse of Sakamoto brawling with Apart midair. Staying on the offensive, Sakamoto beats Apart senseless, ultimately falling onto some steel frames. Apart is mesmerized to be fighting someone so strong, asking if Sakamoto would chat with him, but Sakamoto simply retrieves a metal bar ready to end their bout. Following Osaragi, we see Shishiba scolding her for destroying the Torii gates. But before Osaragi can blame Shishiba for being late, he gets a call from Nagumo. With the cleanup crew helping to tidy up Sakamoto's destroyed store, Nagumo asks Shishiba to flip to the last page of the list given to the inmates. An interesting revelation as Shishiba sees that the inmates had bounties themselves. Shishiba says it was cruel for Slur to set up the inmates to slay each other, but Nagumo suspects that Slur may be trying to drag things out, something they didn't anticipate. Back with Sakamoto, he chooses to deflect the wires Apart sends at him, using his metal bar to wrap and pull Apart in close, only to charge up a swing. Sadly, Apart blocks with his wires, falling to a lower frame. Apart asks when Sakamoto first knew he wasn't alone in the world, flashing back to Apart's childhood when he was always alone, even shunned by his mother, who barely spoke to him. Luckily, Apart's father was always kind to him and advised Apart to be honest with others. That way he'll see the things within people that truly matters. With his father giving him a doll to play with him, we see Apart the next day trying to befriend some kids, but sadly they call him a weirdo, scaring him off. Returning home, Apart wonders why no one will play with him, slowly spiraling into insanity as he ends up puncturing the doll his father gave him. Laughing out of excitement, Apart tries again the following days, only to be turned down and shunned each time, and with each rejection, his anger towards the doll got worse, and eventually, he slaughtered an animal. His mother had noticed Apart acting up, calling for his father to take him to get checked, but the medical reports showed that there was nothing wrong with Apart's health. Hearing the news, Apart's father refused to accept that his son was a normal person, infuriating Apart as his own father is disowning him. Reaching his breaking point, Apart ultimately slayed his father as well, surprised to see his father's mangled brain resembled his own brain with a cross ingrained into it. Hearing Apart desperately wanting to connect with people, Sakamoto says slaying people is the worst thing he can do, as it prevents Apart from connecting with them. Pissed, Apart refuses to listen to Sakamoto's advice, lashing out as he shreds a part of the tower they're standing on. With the tower now tipping due to its damaged structural integrity, Sakamoto grips his fist, declaring he'll stop Apart before he can hurt anyone else. Apart says his father would be proud of how far he has come, but Sakamoto is more focused on stopping the tower from collapsing, swiftly rushing over to some loose power lines only to tug at them to stabilize the tower. Apart is a little annoyed Sakamoto left whilst he was mid-speech, and before Apart can pull Sakamoto away, Sakamoto spots Takamura on the ground floor. With a single swing, Takamura levels the tower and prevents it from falling over, only to leave via taxi. Grateful for the help, Sakamoto slips out of his binds, only to smash Apart with a powerful punch. Taking advantage of Apart's wires, Sakamoto flings Apart into the air with his own wires only to rail him with a ladder, sending Apart falling onto the roof of the tower. Weaving and compressing his wires, Apart tries whipping Sakamoto, but Sakamoto simply retrieves a disc to slice apart his whip. With Sakamoto kicking Apart from the tower, Apart cries that he wants to be human, demanding to know why no one accepts him. But having rescued Apart from his lethal fall, Sakamoto says Apart still has the chance to change for the better. As Sakamoto swings Apart around, Apart desperately clings onto his wires, only to be smashed into the tower by Sakamoto swinging him around. In the aftermath, Sakamoto drags Apart's unconscious body with him back to Mia's clinic, only to be surprised to see such warm hospitality as everyone isn't afraid of him. Able to read Apart's thoughts, Shin orders for Apart to wake up, but Apart leaps back demanding to know if they plan to use him like Kashima. The gang correct Apart as they only want Apart to help them find Slur, and with Sakamoto warning Apart to not act up, Apart is strangely flattered seeing everyone treating him like a normal person. Sitting down, Apart tells the gang about how Kashima hired them and how he tore Kashima apart for using him. But interestingly, he left one of his wires to listen in on Kashima's call with Slur. Apart says Slur plans on distracting the Order members using the inmates while Slur heads for the JAA's headquarters, a plan Sakamoto didn't anticipate. It's quite well known that the JAA houses over 1,000 members, with 400 of them being hitmen, a lucrative operation that houses training for the hitmen along with a full team of staff ready to resolve any issues involving the hitman. In the present, we see two mysterious people riding to one of the branches of the JAA, but before they can approach the JAA building, a guard asks for their ID. Revealed to be Slur and Gaku, they admit that they don't have any forms of ID, prompting the guard to prepare to shoot down the men. A little annoyed, Gaku takes charge and blows a hole in the guard, only for the duo to continue making their way towards the JAA building. Slur says it's been a while since he's visited the association, both ready to enact their noble justice, all while Sakamoto says they should head over to the JA to scope out the situation. Elsewhere, we see that Takamura is in a taxi, all while Slur and Gaku slay two guards in the entrance of the building. Slur says they'll be splitting up from here on, reminding Gaku that there are bathrooms only on odd floors, all whilst the entire JA building is alerted of two intruders in their building. Although everyone is ordered to help subdue the intruders, most of them ignore the command, seeing as it's only two people. But out of nowhere, Gaku appears on the third floor of the building, instantly slaying every staff worker with the swing of his mace. Needing to go to the bathroom, Gaku heads outside only to be sprayed down by Takebe and his students, all simultaneously unloading their rounds on a Gaku. Sadly, Gaku is able to defend with his mace and slay all of Takebe's students, and before Gaku and deal with Takebe himself, Inoda smashes through a wall to knock Gaku down. Takebe says the intruders slayed 40 people in 2 minutes, but out of nowhere Gaku fires a burst of flames towards Inoda with his mace, and before Inoda can retaliate, a single swing sends Inoda through their building and into a parking lot on the other side of the road. At the same time, we see 4 workers preparing to board an elevator, only to run into Slur, who scares them. Before the workers can shoot Slur, one of them goes rogue and slays his colleagues, nonchalantly greeting Slur as his boss. Slur is happy to see Yuta was able to act as a spy for an entire year, and with Slur mentioning how their men have the building secured, Slur says their plan to reset the corrupt JAA will finally be put into action. Outside, we see Takamura exiting his taxi only to be greeted by 2 thugs who work for Slur. Before the men can order Takamura to get lost, Takamura draws his blade and dices up the men, only to continue making his way into the building. Instantly, Gaku detects a powerful presence entering the building, and not before long Takamura appears before Gaku. Gaku immediately tries bringing his mace down on the old man, but Takamura easily blocks the attack, and with a single swing of his blade, Takamura behemothly bisects the surrounding area. Having lost some fingers whilst dodging, Gaku swings towards Takamura's head, but his mace is cut down by another one of Takamura's slashes. Gaku admits he has been bested, and as another powerful slash rings throughout the building, we cut to Slur, who realizes that the ghost of the day, Takamura, is still alive. At that moment, we see Sakamoto, Shin, and Apart leaping into the building with the help of Apart's wires, surprising Sakamoto when he sees Kei Yuzuki is still alive. Slur says he's happy to see Sakamoto as well, but sadly he prefers to be called Slur, alerting Shin as he recognizes Slur to be the man he met in the lab. Sakamoto asks why Slur put a bounty on him, but refusing to answer, Slur blinks before Sakamoto only to puncture him with a knife, all whilst Yuta prepares to shoot Shin. Apart manages to disarm Yuta before he can pull the trigger, but Slur intervenes and severs one of Apart's arms, allowing Yuta to pin down Shin. Yuta excitedly rushes to stab Shin, but Sakamoto launches Yuta back with a kick, surprising Slur. Still bleeding, Sakamoto tosses Shin and Apart back, ordering them to stay back as he'll take down Slur himself. Slur says he's quite excited to be facing Sakamoto again, asking if Sakamoto wants to try killing him. When Sakamoto tries a sneak attack with a pen, Slur easily evades and destroys Sakamoto's pen, scolding him for being so naive. In the blink of an eye, strange blows rupture the ground and blow Sakamoto back, an attack Shin couldn't see. Slur says the JCC's way of teaching things and ideals always brought misfortune to everyone. And although Slur wasn't anyone special whilst training, he soon learned that people needed to fight with no emotions. Pissed, Shin tries launching his fist at Slur, but as Slur slips the punch, he prepares to put Shin down. Sakamoto is forced to endure more pain to rescue Shin, something that annoys Slur, as Shin is clearly a burden to Sakamoto. Plus, Sakamoto is nowhere near as strong as he used to be. Slur says if Sakamoto doesn't fight seriously, he'll simply slay more people. And to top things off, Slur mentions how he'll go after Sakamoto's family next. Instantly, Sakamoto's glare emanates killing intent, prompting Sakamoto to leap forth with several powerful attacks. Each one of Sakamoto's attacks rupture the surrounding air and ground, and seeing as Sakamoto is slowly regaining his will to kill, Slur chooses to meet Sakamoto head-on. Shin cries for Sakamoto to not break his family's rules, only for Gaku to appear through the walls, breaking up the fight. At the same time, we see Takamura entering the scene as well, having followed after Gaku, and when Yuta tries firing at Takamura, Takamura deflects the blow only to cut Yuta's lead finger and slice his neck. Gaku tries attacking from behind, but Takamura slices off Gaku's dominant arm, forcing Gaku to kick away his own arm to put distance between them. Before Takamura can put down Gaku, Slur intercepts and drags him away from the impact zone, declaring they'll leave for today. Sakamoto rushes to halt their escape, swiftly exchanging several blows with Slur, buying time for Takamura to sneak up from behind. Sadly, Yuta chooses to give his life to save Slur, suddenly detonating an explosive that ruptures throughout the entire floor. Sakamoto manages to cover Shin and Apart with his apron, and as the dust settles, we see Slur towering over Sakamoto with some dead-looking eyes. Without saying anything else, Slur and Gaku take their leave, having officially slayed 176 people with 3 injured and 1 missing. Strangely, the number of hitmen due to Slur's antics have been cut down by a quarter, and within a few days we see the JAA building under repair. At Ikuzuka Hospital, Sakamoto sees the Tokyo Tower is now a leaning tower, only for Shin to be seen hesitating to greet Sakamoto. Shin blames himself for being of no use when Slur attacked, but out of nowhere we see Nagumo and Hyo visiting Sakamoto, choosing to ask what Sakamoto had found out about Slur when he ran into him. Sakamoto reveals that Slur is K, something that catches Nagumo's attention as he reveals that K was part of his and Sakamoto's class in the JCC days. But Hyo says he only knew Akeo to be someone worthy of being noticed alongside Sakamoto and Nagumo. Before Nagumo and Hyo can leave, Sakamoto demands to have any information the Order had gathered, but this pisses Hyo off as he tries stomping Sakamoto out. Although Sakamoto had leapt out of the way, Hyo says Sakamoto is retired, so he should stick to running his store with his family, but Sakamoto refuses to back down. Hyo starts by smashing Sakamoto through several walls and into an MRI room, scolding Sakamoto for always acting alone. But Sakamoto says he has actually changed, signaling for Shin to appear. Working together, Sakamoto and Shin bind Hyo onto the magnetic MRI machine with some bars, only for Sakamoto to ask for Hyo's help. Hyo is surprised Sakamoto is reaching out, suggesting that Sakamoto look into the JCC databank, only for Sakamoto to leave the scene. Hyo is annoyed he had been tricked, apologizing for causing a scene as he leaves with Nagumo, all while Sakamoto and Shin are seen on the roof of the hospital. Sakamoto says Hyo has always been a kind soul, but Shin takes the chance to apologize for being so weak. Sakamoto says Shin and the others are teaching him how to live a life without harming others, reassuring Shin that his time will come for redemption. Plus, they need to go to the JCC next. At the JA, Shishiba and Osaraji are a little annoyed that the intruders wiped out 40% of the branch, and due to the attack, their stock and clients are dropping out. Shishiba says management are rearranging things and need replacements for those slain, and seeing as the order members really need to step up and deal with Slur, Shishiba says they'll have to visit Kanaguri. Elsewhere in an abandoned building, we see Kashima help stitching Gaku's arm together, both still amazed that Takamura was strong enough to give Gaku trouble. Slur says Gaku may be the first person to survive a battle against Takamura, but Gaku says he is sad Kashima can't fix his ear. Slur is annoyed that their mission failed due to Takamura's interference, a being Slur has little to no information on, and it was thanks to Yuta giving his life that Slur survived. Slur says both Takamura and Sakamoto are people they need to look out for, and seeing as the security at other JA branches must have been heightened due to their attack, they need to focus on recruiting new pawns to do their bidding. Back with Sakamoto, we see Shin shyly utter that he didn't go to JCC and got his license through an external exam. Liu appears asking if the Japan Clear Creation Online is the Hitman school they're talking about, surprised that it's a 4-year course where only 10% pass. Liu wonders why Sakamoto doesn't just visit as a graduate, but Sakamoto says the school is quite strict, all suddenly turning to face Aoi, who demands to know what the JCC transfer flyers are for. In the span of a day, we see Sakamoto and Shin boarding a plane, only for Sakamoto to reveal that they're going undercover as transfer students. Shin hears that there is no age limit to enter the school, but the transfer exam is difficult. Shocked to hear Sakamoto will disguise himself with a mere cap, but funnily we see the other passengers unable to recognize Sakamoto with his disguise. Off to the side, we see a blue-haired girl praying to pass the transfer exam and become an assassin. Whilst on their trip, we see Sakamoto and Shin fueling up for the exam, only to be greeted by the 28-year-old jackass who is retaking the transfer exam for the 6th time. Jack warns our duo to sharpen their senses and stop stuffing themselves, seeing as the transfer exam is very grueling. But Sakamoto and Shin could care less. Annoyed, Jack steals Sakamoto's food only to kick it to the ground, something that makes Sakamoto sad, but the girl behind him feels bad for Sakamoto as she believes he's stuffing his face to quench his nerves. At that moment, the flight attendant Mizuno welcomes everyone on the plane as there seem to be 360 applicants aboard the plane, and for the first test, Mizuno instructs the examinees to identify disguised examiners on board and steal special JCC bullets to pass. With Mizuno allowing the people on board to slay the examiners to obtain the bullets, we suddenly see several weapons drop from different compartments, marking the start of the test. Instantly, the plane erupts into chaos as everyone starts accusing each other of being examiners in disguise, all whilst Mizuno announces that their weapons assigned to them have been randomized. Jack chooses to confront Mizuno, seeing as he was given a spatula, but turning the tables, Mizuno steals Jack's weapon only to knock him out, revealing herself to be an examiner with several bullets for the taking. In the crowd, we see a masked man slaying a peer, only to be sad there are no JCC bullets on the corpse. At the same time, we see a businessman analyze the situation and target only people around their mid and late 20s, all whilst another man with a mohawk patiently waits for everyone to tire themselves out before he strikes. Shin is a little annoyed that he can't use his psychic abilities to find his targets. And off to the side, we see the blue-haired girl accidentally firing a machine gun and scaring away her peers, only to feel bad for Sakamoto, who has been assigned a pin. At that moment, a man chooses to rush Sakamoto, and before the girl can help Sakamoto out, Sakamoto knocks out the man with hundreds of thrusts using his pen, a feat that catches everyone's attention. Seeing how strong Sakamoto is, everyone begins rushing him as they believe he is an examiner, but Sakamoto gets to work dismantling them. Seeing a man trying to spray down the blue-haired girl, Sakamoto rushes to push her out of the way, only to leap in to destroy the man's weapon and clobber him. The girl is very grateful for the help, shocked when Sakamoto reveals that the man was an examiner, swiftly rushing to shake Sakamoto's hands. As Sakamoto leaves to search for Shin, he chooses to give the girl one of his 3 bullets, but she sternly refuses. The girl says her role model would never accept free handouts, revealing that in her past, she was picked on for being weak, so now she must prove herself to others. At the same time, we follow Mizuno being strangled by Mafuyu Seiba, and as Mafuyu retrieves the bullets around Mizuno's neck, he prepares to take Mizuno's life. Out of nowhere, a kick forces Mafuyu back, annoyed that a 21-year-old geezer like Shin is picking on a 14-year-old boy like himself. In an instant, Mafuyu dashes and slices at Shin's neck, and when Shin leans back to evade, Mafuyu follows up by firing a hidden pistol he had. Although Shin survives the onslaught, some of his blood ends up splattering onto Mafuyu, forcing Mafuyu to quickly clean off the blood. Shin hears that Mafuyu the germaphobe had missed the general admission exam due to his brother getting sick, and seeing as he needs to end their duel fast, Mafuyu unveils some blades that appear from his shoes. Rushing towards Shin, Mafuyu forces Shin to dodge, only to begin deflecting Shin's gunfire, all whilst leaping to avoid the knives Shin throws at him. As both boys exchange blows with their blades, Shin chooses to activate his foresight skill to read Mafuyu's movements, and with a flurry of punches, Shin sends Mafuyu to the ground, declaring he needs to catch up to Sakamoto eventually, only to start a timer. Before Shin and Sakamoto had boarded the plane, Shin had asked Sakamoto to not assist him as he wanted to pass the exam all by himself. And now in the present, Mafuyu is seen rushing at Shin with his blades once more. When Shin moves back to evade, he begins peppering Mafuyu with some shots to scare him back, but Mafuyu retaliates by slicing the surrounding area to obstruct Shin's vision. Sadly, Shin has already read Mufuyu's mind, leaping in for a kick, and when Mafuyu grabs Shin's leg for a kick, Shin simply reverses the hold and snaps one of Mafuyu's blades, only to pin the boy down. With Mafuyu accepting his fate, he is surprised to hear Shin has no intentions of slaying him, and when Shin demands that Mafuyu hand over his JCC bullets, Shin is caught off guard when Mafuyu begins to cry. Shin defuses the situation by mentioning how gifted Mafuyu is at such a young age. But this makes Mafuyu utter that he wants to join the JCC to become an order member. But out of nowhere, the Mohawk man appears from his hiding place, only to snatch up Mafuyu's bullets. In the blink of an eye, Shin halts the man only to retrieve the bullets. And feeling sympathy for Mafuyu, Shin agrees to hand him one of the 3 bullets he has. At the same time, we see the blue-haired girl trying her best to take down her competition, but Sakamoto appears asking if she needs help. Getting to work, Sakamoto instructs the girl to tighten her stance in order to land her shots, and seeing as they're friends now, the girl introduces herself as Akira, all while Sakamoto uses his first name Ataro for disguise. Elsewhere on the plane, we see another strange examiner filming his fight scenes, and as the examinees rush in for his bullets, the man is able to decapitate all of them with a wave of his hands. Revealed to be Kanaguri, an order member, we suddenly hear that 63 participants out of 360 are left alive, plus there's only 30 minutes left of the exam. At the same time, we see Mafuyu following Shin around, seemingly obsessed with Shin's reason for wanting to join the JCC. Creepily, we notice Kanaguri sneaking up on them with his camera, and funnily, he is being wheeled around by another examinee who he has bribed with a bullet. Instantly, Shin begins to shake as he recognizes Kanaguri to be a famous director for Hitman films, but Mafuyu clearly doesn't care. When Mafuyu leaves, he utters that films are too long and people can simply watch summaries of them online, but this pisses Kanaguri off. With Kanaguri rushing the boys, we see Shin employ his foresight, but strangely Kanaguri is able to divert his future as he mystically blinks into Shin's blind spot. Before Kanaguri can put down the boys, a stray bullet halts his attack, revealed to be Sakamoto and Akira, who have arrived. Instantly, Kanaguri is captivated by Akira's look and expression, swiftly appearing behind her, and when Sakamoto swats Kanaguri away, Kanaguri simply leaps back whilst dragging Akira with him. Revealed to have stolen everyone's bullets, Kanaguri declares he'll start shooting again, only to take out one of the pilots manning the plane, a feat that sends the plane plummeting. With everyone now being suspended in mid-air, Kanaguri heads to retrieve a deadly-looking camera, and as he charges up a blast, Kanaguri ends up blowing a hole in the plane. As everyone is sucked out, Kanaguri cries for everyone to play their part in his film. All whilst head examiner Usami wonders if hiring Kanaguri was the right call. Luckily, the examiners have parachutes to soften their fall, prompting Mizuto to suggest they start their second stage of their exam. Usami simply announces that examinees with at least a bullet will pass if they survive the fall, and funnily enough, examiner Noro is seen falling alongside everyone without a parachute, all whilst Kanaguri continues to film his protagonist Akira. Seeing an opening, Sakamoto heads to brawl with Kanaguri, but surprisingly Kanaguri is able to defend Sakamoto's advances. It's revealed that Sakamoto had managed to steal back the bullets with the exchange, and having brought his apron, Sakamoto attempts to create his own makeshift parachute, but sadly, it is of no use. Inspired by Sakamoto's determination, Akira racks her brain for a solution to survive the fall, only to remember a time when her family member had asked for help sewing a hole in one of their jackets. Suddenly realizing something, Akira asks to borrow everyone's shirts, only to masterfully sew each one together to create a massive parachute. With 5 people clinging to the parachute, they manage to slow their fall, all ultimately landing into the water below. With Akira realizing she can't swim, she is rescued by Sakamoto, who takes her on to land alongside the others who declare they'll pay back Kanaguri for what he's done. As part of some washed-up debris, the gang spot a lone JCC bullet that they ask Akira to take, seeing as she saved their lives, something that excites her. When Sakamoto heads to inspect Akira's sewing, he is intrigued to see such amazing stitches, wondering who Akira is, but at the same time we see a boat steering towards the plane crash, all whilst the girl excitedly utters that she wants to meet the warriors that are surviving such a grueling exam. With Kanaguri revealed to still be alive, we see him upset about his destroyed camera, all while Shin takes note of their dwindling peers. Akira says she wants to pass and be classmates with everyone, only for Jay to return to everyone, showing off that he found a JCC bullet as well. Off to the side, we see the examiners a little surprised at how low their examinee count is, but seeing as they normally only accept 2 to 3 candidates every year, we see Usami drawing everyone's attention to some new participants that are joining them for the 3rd stage of the exam. With Shinaya, now Torimaru, and Joichiro Kaji joining the examinees. We see Jay complain about how these brats are receiving special treatment, but when Jay insults Nao's keychain, Nao instantly pins Jay down with her weapon. With Nao asking Jay to calm down, we hear Usami reveal that the 3 special guests were recommended by top hitmen. Plus Nao seems to love Sakamoto, the legendary hitman, hence her keychain. With Sakamoto and Shin agreeing to avoid Nao, we cut over to Slur, who's trying to contact a new student recruit, but Slur suspects that the recruit is taking an exam at the moment, agreeing to take it easy for Nao, as Slur says he's excited to see how fast their new friend can run. Switching back to Sakamoto, we see Usami asking everyone to open up the JCC bullets they have, only for everyone to receive a color headband. Announcing the 3rd stage of the exam, Usami says everyone will be participating in a team base tail tag game, where there are 7 teams representing a color each, and they have 2 days to steal each other's headbands, with the zone being a 10-kilometer radius of the forest. With the examinees wondering why the exam got so easy all of a sudden, Usami secretly admits that they can't be having any more casualties, but at the same time, Shin realizes that he will be facing off against Sakamoto, who is on a different colored team alongside Akira and Jay, whereas Shin is partnered with Mafuyu and Kaji. With everyone else partnered into 3-man teams, Usami announces the start of the exam, only for all parties to begin blitzing through the forest as they rush to secure different areas. When Sakamoto asks Shin to team up, Shin declares that he wants to prove himself during this exam, a declaration Sakamoto accepts as he parts way with Shin. Whilst heading through the forest, Shin detects someone sneaking up from behind, but making use of a surrounding branch, Shin blows them away only to secure a point for his white team. Following Sakamoto's team, we see Akira asking Jay to play fair, all while Sakamoto holds back his tears as he fears Shin no longer respects him. At the same time, we see two examinees fleeing from someone, but upon hearing Nao's voice above them, they freakishly watch as Nao declares she'll collect all the colored headbands. Leaping onto the men with her weapon, she manages to blow the men back, but when the men beg for their life, she simply soldiers on and slays them. Giddy about the number of headbands she has received, Nao suddenly locks on a Shin's team who are passing by. But as we cut back to Sakamoto's team, we see Jay scolding our duo for stuffing their faces during an exam. With Akira managing to sway Jay to relax with them, Jay demands to know why there is a wooden hut near them, but Sakamoto says he quickly built it for them. Suddenly, a butterfly lands on Jay, freaking him out, but Akira asks Jay not to move sporadically so as to not harm them. Akira begins rambling on about the entrancing flight patterns the butterflies exhibit, but upon hearing Jay beg for someone to help remove the butterfly on his back, we suddenly notice Akira skillfully removing the butterfly without harming its wings. With Sakamoto taking note of such movement, he asks where Akira learnt such skills, but Akira says she learnt everything from a relative, and sadly Akira still can't face off against actual people. Out of nowhere, we suddenly see a yellow team member rushing past them, crying out that a crazy woman is after them. Frightened, Jay begins running after the man, but having tripped over a trap, Sakamoto and his party are suddenly trapped by some metal wiring. With Sakamoto unable to break free, it's revealed that the yellow team had concocted the trap to slay Sakamoto's team and steal their headbands. And with yellow team firing an explosion at Sakamoto's team, we cut back to Shin, who blames Mufuyu for letting a team get away due to Mufuyu not wanting to get wet. All of a sudden, Shin is forced to duck a lethal swing from Nao's weapon, weirdly freaked out to see how giddy she is. Seeing an opening, Mufuyu spins and kicks Nao away, but Nao seems to be more fixated on her Sakamoto keychain getting dirty. Back with Sakamoto, we learn he had blocked the explosive projectile with his apron, and as the gang struggle to break free, Akira surprisingly is able to slit through the netting. Refusing to allow their prey to escape, Yellow Team continues to rain bullets onto Sakamoto's team. And before Akira can help Sakamoto and Jay escape, we see Yellow Team appearing to finish the job. Frightened, Akira says she doesn't want to harm others, but Sakamoto says there is nothing wrong about fleeing. Sadly, Akira refuses to leave another one of her loved ones behind, locking in as Akira declares she'll slay those who harm her loved ones. In an instant, Akira monstrously slays the Yellow Team's leader with her fingers alone, and as Akira pursues the other two members, Sakamoto musters up his strength to free himself from the metal net only to halt Akira's pursuit. With Akira now calming down, Sakamoto rushes over to stop the Yellow Team's leader from bleeding, all whilst Akira apologizes profusely as she only followed the path guiding her to rescue her friends. Recognizing the path Akira is referring to, Sakamoto remembers a time when Nagumo and himself trained alongside a friend who also listened to the path, and when Sakamoto hears that Akira's family name is Akeo, he suddenly realizes that Akira is related to Ryan Akeo, one of Sakamoto's former friends. Switching to Mufuyu, he is seen scolding Nao for obsessing over her Sakamoto doll, but this pisses her off as she refuses to allow anyone to insult Sakamoto. At the same time, we see Slur and his party seemingly getting to work on a devious plan, but back with Sakamoto, he remembers a time when Ryan would outperform Sakamoto and Nagumo at a shooting challenge, a skill the boys believe to be natural talent. With Akira revealing that Ryan is her auntie, Akira asks if Sakamoto knows anything about her aunt, all whilst Nao begins hunting down Shin and his party. Manically, Nao's gun spray forces the boys to begin running, and with Shin refusing to fight back, they end up leaping off a cliff and into the water below. Interestingly, Kaji thinks quickly and manages to rescue Mufuyu and Shin from drowning, and with the boys riding on a log downstream, they suddenly spot Nao swinging through the nearby forest only to intercept them. Nao cries that the first time she saw Sakamoto, he had saved her and immediately she fell in love, even changing her whole perspective on life to hopefully one day reuniting with Sakamoto. As Now lands on the boy's log, she swiftly swings her weapon at Shin, but Shin evades only to take a battle stance ready to fight. Recognizing Shin's stance, Now wonders if Shin is mimicking Sakamoto's fighting style, suddenly accusing Shin to be a Sakamoto fan. With the tension broken, Now begins rambling on how she loves Sakamoto's cold attitude and murderous nature, but Shin corrects Now. Shin says Sakamoto is a kind-hearted family man that has drastically changed over the years, but Now doesn't understand what Shin is saying. Shin declares that he'll become strong enough to one day stand alongside Sakamoto, but such a bold claim pisses Now off, as she declares she'll forever be Sakamoto's #1 fan. With Now rushing Shin, Shin uses his foresight to evade a lethal blow, and with Shin continuing to evade Now's advance, we zoom out to see Shania and his party spying on battle. Shania's team is revealed to have claimed 3 points already, but strangely Shania suddenly removes his tag only to begin weirdly staring at it. Fighting throughout the river, Now is seen using the surrounding water to her advantage, relentlessly chasing after Shin with several monstrous strikes, but Shin easily evades her advances. Now wonders if Shin is reading her mind somehow, switching things up by detaching the axe from her weapon only to launch it at Shin, and when Now tries firing her rifle, Shin throws off her aim with a kick. Following Mufuyu and Kaji, they both wonder how they can help Shin, but it seems Mufuyu is too seasick to fight and Kaji is too shy to help out. With Now cleaving her weapon at Shin, he manages to sneak in a kick, but sadly the attack doesn't faze Now. With Now switching to peppering Shin with her rifle, Shin runs along the river to avoid the gunfire, only to begin scanning the surrounding area for a way to turn the tides. Seeing Now hot on his tracks, Shin switches to offense and begins striking Now's weapon to stall her, and after an exchange, Shin knocks Now back far enough to send her plummeting into a nearby waterfall. Seeing as he can relax Now, Shin prepares to leave, but when he hears Now's plea for help, Shin dives into the water, seeing as she may not be able to swim. Funnily enough, Shin spots Now's Sakamoto doll has been caught between some rocks, but regardless, Shin ends up saving Now and her doll. Now wonders why Shin saved her, but Shin utters that Sakamoto would have done the same, words that make Now admit that Shin is a better Sakamoto fan than herself. Before Shin leaves, he tries asking for Now's tag, but suddenly Shania appears, blowing Now back with a powerful punch, only for it to be revealed that Gaku is the one seemingly manning Shania's body. With Now mortally wounded, Gaku is instructed by Slur to begin recruiting people with the help of their remote virtual reality tech, but suddenly Shania is surrounded as Usami says Shania is disqualified. Apparently, since Shania removed his tag, Shania can't participate anymore, and to make things worse, several corpses were discovered that seems to be Shania's doing. Immediately, a male examiner pins Shania to the ground, scolding the boy for disobeying rules, but Gaku gets pissed as he reverses the hold and drags the examiner across the floor. Using the examiner as a weapon, he swings the man's body to blow everyone back, and when Usami orders for a sniper to take down Shania, Shania simply uses the male teacher's body as a meat shield. Following up, Shania flings the corpse towards the sniper, forcing it to swing in with a rope of knives. But such an attack is negated when Shania grabs hold of her ankles. Shania chooses to spin Atu around and skip her across a river and onto a nearby wall, alerting Usami as he orders for Shin and his party to evacuate the scene, but sadly Shin declares he needs to overcome the obstacle ahead of him if he wants to grow stronger. With Shania rushing towards the gang, Shin attempts to activate his foresight skill, but his heart begins to throb and tense up seeing as his body is overexerting itself. Locked in place, Shin helplessly watches as Shania targets him, but suddenly Gaku is smashed into the ground, revealed to be Now and Mufuyu who have joined the battle, exciting Gaku. When both Mufuyu and Shin rush Shania, Shania easily halts the boys' attacks, following up by kicking Shin aside. Shin is able to block, but he wonders why he can't read Shania's mind as he seems to be sleeping. And when Kaji prepares to join the battle, he notices that he can hear machinery noises coming from Shania. now tries blasting Shania while Shin leaps in for some hand-to-hand combat. But Shania is still able to fend off the attack, even evading a surprise slash attack from the axe now had tossed to Shin. Before the fight can resume, we see Gaku had hit his head as the building he is in is quite small, and with Gaku continuing to fend off Shin and the others, Kashima reveals that they had to recruit a boy that would be able to keep up with Gaku's movements. With Gaku instructed to keep any possible recruits alive, Shania is seen dashing towards our trio, only to simultaneously strike all three of them. And before they can react, Shania grinds Mafuyu into the ground, only to kick him aside. Moving on to Now, Shania forces Kaji to drag Now and Shin's bodies away. As for Mafuyu, his vision seems to be blurred. When Kaji heads to retrieve Mafuyu refuses any help as he mindlessly marches towards Shania, actions that intrigue Kaji, seeing how heroic Mafuyu is. Helping out, Now chooses to launch Mafuyu towards Shania, but sadly Shania pummels the boy with a punch, only managing to shatter a portion of Gaku's headset. Seeing Mafuyu limping over, Kaji scolds himself for being so pathetic, but Shin appears asking that Kaji not be so hard on himself, words that inspire Kaji to act. Standing tall, Kaji declares he has a plan, but as we follow Sakamoto, we see his party leisurely interacting with the wildlife in the forest. When Sakamoto sees the surrounding animals acting strange, he wonders what Shin is up to, and as we switch back to Shin and the others, it's revealed that Gaku's vision has been restricted thanks to Mafuyu's attack earlier. Kaji suspects that Shania is being remotely controlled, something he was able to figure out thanks to his enhanced hearing. But Gaku gets intrigued as he darts towards the boys. With Shania forcing the boys to disperse, Kaji confirms that there is a delay between Gaku's actions and Shania's movements. But surprisingly, that impact from Shania's punch opens up a hole in the floor, revealing a limestone cave. Shin asks what they should do now, leading Kaji to explain that Gaku's movements can be heard over the VR headset. Plus, with the half-a-second delay, Kaji can basically determine every move Shania will throw at them. Shin says he can read Kaji's mind to use the information as well. And when Shania rushes towards the boys, Shin seems to be the only one hit by the attack. Shin realizes that reading Kaji's mind won't be enough as he is still too slow to react to Shania's movements. And with another kick, Shin is left lying on the ground, unable to move. Wondering what Sakamoto would do, Shin musters up his remaining strength to get back up, and with only himself to blame for being weak, Shin prepares to surpass his limits. Setting a timer, Shin uses his foresight to evade another attack from Shania, and with Shin peeping into Kaji's future, he manages to keep up with Shania's movements. Throwing out a kick, Shin manages to stall Gaku temporarily, but sadly his vision is beginning to blur and his heart is aching quite badly. Excited, Gaku gets serious as he launches towards Shin, even tossing Kaji aside as he continues brawling with Shin. Getting an idea, Kaji asks for Shin to buy him some time as Kaji begins to listen in closely, honing his skill to assess Shania's movements. With everything now under control, Kaji rushes towards Shania only to strike him with a familiar-looking punch, an attack Gaku says is his exact technique. Kaji declares that he has memorized all of Shania's attack patterns through his sounds, intriguing Gaku as he watches Shin kick some cave spikes at him. But when Gaku evades, Kaji simply begins barraging him with punches. Flipping back to evade, Kaji cries that Shania's movement are restricted since Gaku is in a building. And with Kaji pushing Shania back, he perfectly predicts that Gaku will hit a wall soon. Seeing an opening, Shin rushes in for an attack. But when Gaku opts to strike the wall near him to attack Shin, Shin simply uses his foresight to evade the blow. Now with both boys able to pincer Shania, Gaku has no choice but to get serious, suddenly railing past Kaji only to blow a hole in Kaji's body. Following up, Gaku claps his hands to produce a sound wave, ultimately overwhelming Kaji's ears in exchange for some of the VR tech to be worn down, and with Kaji out of commission, Shin's body finally reaches its limit. With nothing left, Shin is hopelessly smacked around by Shania, and as Shania prepares to snuff out Shin, Sakamoto triumphantly appears, kicking Shania aside. Kashima is frightened to see that Sakamoto has appeared, but Gaku can't help but get excited. Getting started, Shania tosses a projectile to blind Sakamoto, only to follow up by throwing out a punch. But both attacks don't faze Sakamoto. Sakamoto first orders Shin to get Kaji to safety, and needing to buy Shin some time, Sakamoto smashes the cave wall to further flood the area with water. With both Sakamoto and Shania both brawling in the water, they're both swept deeper and deeper into the cave, only to burst out the side of a mountain. As both boys plummet into a plane on the shore of the beach, Sakamoto takes the chance to bind Shania to a chair, only to fling him back. Sakamoto and Shania resume by throwing out hundreds of punches at each other, but Sakamoto switches things up by smacking Shania around with a luggage bag. Countering, Shania tears up some of the metal flooring to destroy Sakamoto's luggage, but Sakamoto simply smacks Shania outside with a notebook he found. Now on the airplane's wing, Gaku admits Sakamoto is very strong, but suddenly Shania is flung into the air when Sakamoto stomps on the opposing wing Shania is on. With Sakamoto using one of the airplane's legs to help reach Shania mid-air, Sakamoto manages to whack Shania with the airplane's leg, officially ending the duel in Sakamoto's favor as both boys plummet into the water below.